Thank you, Mike. If we all could rise for the pledge, please. Joe, can you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a moment of silence for the men and women in the armed forces, our first responders, our veterans, those fighting the good fight in the Ukraine, and those poor souls that lost their lives in the earthquakes in Syria and in Turkey. Thank you. Sal?
Good evening, all. Megan Bird, 2 Carlson Road. I am here tonight to speak for myself as well as on behalf of the PTO in town. I'm townwide PTO president, and we fully support the budget as presented to you tonight for the Board of Education. We feel that our administrators, our central office administrators, as well as the school administrators, along with the Board of Education, went through this budget with a fine-tooth comb and did everything they could do to reduce as far as possible. You'll notice tonight that literally like 0.15% is not taken up through contractual obligations, extra busing costs, which are a nationwide problem, and things like increases in energy costs. There is not fluff in this budget. There is not anything extra that you can strip from this budget without being detrimental to our students. So I urge you to just pass this budget and let the taxpayers vote on it as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter, I'll let you open up for the Board of Finance.
Motion Board of Finance to reconvene.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And for the Town Council, motion to reconvene for tonight.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. And I would like to welcome the new superintendent, Board of Education, and the administrators in the back, and board members to tonight's meeting, where we get together, ask questions, and talk about the educational budget. Who's going to start off first?
I will start off, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
First off, I'd like to introduce everyone to Dr. Janet Carlotto, our superintendent of schools. I don't know if everyone has met her. Everyone knows my vice chair, Wendy Polnack, on my right, and our director of fiscal services, Anthony Giovanni. So we'll start off. The district, in developing its budget, looks closely at the district's mission statement to provide guidance finalizing the proposed budget. So the professionals
you see behind us as well in the education business and on staff within our district put together their needs. They review the must-haves, the want-to-haves, and the nice-to-haves. And for the most part, this is a must-have budget. The Board of Education adopted budget supports and maintains the instructional programs and the needed staffing levels to continue the district's focus on instructional improvement, expanded mental health services, career pathways, and access to programs. Primary focus in our budget deliberations was centralized around the following question: does this budget conform to our mission statement and our town's values in regards to delivery of educational services to our students and to our constituents? As the board took a unanimous vote in the adoption of this budget, we feel those conditions are met. The Board of Education appreciates the continuous collaboration with the town's legislative body as we consistently look together for efficiencies that help us maintain the highest levels of fiscal responsibility and maintain our building's infrastructure at the same time as delivering the educational services that meet the needs of our students. So the budget of $71,075,000 $51 represents a 4.88% increase over the 22-23 operating budget. Again, this budget was passed with a unanimous vote by the New Milford Board of Education on January 26. The proposed increase of $3,307,762 includes the following, which summarizes to a large extent the contractual obligations in the Board of Education adopted budget. An increase of $1,276,893 in salaries, an increase of $995,998 in health insurance, and an increase of $930,016 in total transportation costs, which on this chart is included in the other services line. So these expenses total $3,202,907 or 4.73% of the total 4.88% increase. This is just a pie chart reflection. The salary dollar amount relative to the 59.4% is $42,216,357 and includes all types of employees, teachers, paras, etc., and all types of pay. That's regular stipends, subs, overtime. The benefit dollar amount relative to the 17.10% is $12,269,224 and includes all our health insurance costs. Other services dollar amounts relative to the 5.85% is $10,655,901 and includes general busing, athletic busing, sped busing, and sped tuition. Everything else dollar amount relative to the 17.41% is $8,147,094 and includes professional services, property services, supplies, capital other, and dues and fees as well. And so examples of the line item types are within each can be found in Appendix A of the budget books that you guys have. So this chart is really just a reflection of what is rollover versus what is new. And when I say rollover, out of that rollover items, we're talking about other contracts like copiers and things of that nature that are not salary related. So the new items are illustrated on the right-hand side. So for transparency, this chart illustrates what is not carryover of existing services. The superintendent proposed and the Board of Education agreed that some increase in services were necessary to help recover educational losses to our youngest students heavily impacted by COVID and COVID restrictions like the mandatory masking. The new items are to help correct learning losses at both the second grade level, where 2 teachers are in the proposed budget, and at the 4th grade level, where 1 additional teacher has been added to the 4th grade level. Our 4th graders entered our system at the beginning of COVID restrictions, including those state mandates and the transitions to remote learning. They really, truly suffered. And the board feels it has been a truly challenging set of bad circumstances where educational delivery and required content was severely impacted. The 2nd graders suffered similar educational losses, and the superintendent and the board felt that this grade also needed some additional help. This is why the board supports those additions. You can also see that there's a kiln in there and some smaller items. This is a slide of the contractual wage increases by the bargaining unit. I don't know if everyone knows this, and I'm not speaking to everyone here, I'm speaking to the public almost at this point. The state of Connecticut is a binding arbitration state. And what this means is that the unions cannot go on strike. It also means that both sides across the negotiating table must act in good faith and fairness towards each other. So this table reflects that good faith negotiation. In fact, considering the recent jump in inflation and the cost of goods, these are very reasonable numbers. The Board of Ed negotiators also realized that many of the unions could possibly get more if negotiations were pushed to a binding arbitration, because arbiters assigned would look at both parties' last best offer to judge whether each party acted in good faith and fairness. Arbiters would look at all of their settlements in the state to help determine fair settlement values. Arbiters would also look at the town's finances and the ability to pay as part of that fair settlement determination. Arbitration would cost the town anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000 for each arbitration hearing, and more in legal fees as part of the arbitration proceedings. I know I've heard that some, and this is maybe just Facebook noise, but teachers make too much and there are those who would support a 0% increase. And I'm not speaking for the board here, but I'll say I personally disagree with that philosophy. And even if I did agree with it, I don't think it's possible given the binding arbitration laws in the state of Connecticut. It just wouldn't happen. What is not reflected in this chart is how the BOE, the Board of Education negotiation team, looks at the numbers and considers those numbers. The negotiation team tries to balance certain years of each contract so that some is front-loaded and some is back-loaded. The board is cognizant that many unions would prefer a front load. However, the board thinks piling all of those higher percentage numbers into one contract year would be detrimental to the taxpayers. Also not noted is what is called premium cost sharing, which is the amount each member pays that helps offset insurance costs to the town. This is called cost avoidance, and increasing cost avoidance numbers is also combined during our contract negotiations. As a reminder, improved cost avoidance numbers are not ever included in a proposed budget. Previous BOE membership spearheaded efforts to join the state partnership plan, which has saved the town millions of dollars in cost avoidance over the years. But you don't see it anywhere. It's just something that we're not paying. This is just an illustration of what I think is pretty good fiscal responsibility over the years. There might be others who would argue that we are not investing enough to support our students. So I'm sure there could be a lot of lively debates from either position. I'm simply putting up there as food for thought during the budget deliberations. In general, I think taxpayers view these comparisons as helpful when determining how they vote during their budget referendum. And as you can see, we're our per pupil rank in the state out of 166 districts in Connecticut. We're not very high up off the bottom. 21, 22 is 156 out of 166. And 22, these are lagging numbers, of course, 22, 23, those numbers aren't in yet. The source data is located at the bottom of the page, so anyone in the public can go look at these numbers for themselves. This is also something I wanted everyone to take a look at. This is called Adjusted Equalized Net Grand List Per Capita. It's another food for thought slide. Although our per pupil spending, according to references shown on the previous slide, is down around the 156, 150 number, and that's been pretty consistent. This is what some might consider our ability to pay, and it's ranked number 70 out of the 166, and this is according to state available data. I'd remind everyone that these type of numbers would also be looked at in arbitration hearings if we went to an arbitration hearing. So if taxpayers view these comparisons as helpful when determining how they vote during the budget referendum, I hope that helps a little bit, because our ability to pay is a lot higher than our willingness to pay. And these are state numbers. I'm not saying one thing or the other about this budget, but these are just state numbers and they're just available for everyone to review. And again, the source data is at the bottom. As you can see from this chart, the Board of Education budgets over time have been adopted and managed with very small amounts of contingency and very little margins for mistakes. As an example, in the 2016-17 budget year, all it would have taken is one special education student along with associated transportation costs to come into our district at the wrong time, and it would have put us in the red for the school year. Recently, COVID and planning for COVID-related impacts and mandates in a systematic financial way has proven really difficult. It's like catching an arrow out of its midair flight. Teachers leaving the profession, inability by the district to fill some of those positions, including what are termed as shortage areas that require higher levels of certification to teach, have been problems. And based on measures of student achievement, or at least partly tied to that recent loss of achievement, we can't hire the teachers that we need to hire to fulfill our educational goals. It's been a huge problem. And that also is one of the things that drives the end of year balance, is our inability to hire positions on a timely basis. For instance, our HR director was missing for 6 months. So that ends up being an end of year balance for us that normally wouldn't be there if we had the positions filled for the full time during the year. On the one hand, these surpluses are typically asked for and added to the district's capital accounts. So these are accounts again, in my personal opinion, which have been unfunded or underfunded for decades. And having those funds will enable the district to better participate in the care of our facilities. I appreciate the mayor's efforts towards overall maintenance of our facilities, many of which can only be undertaken by the town because the financial obligations are too large and therefore must be bonded. However, I would say that these surpluses, while enhancing our capital accounts, comes with an educational risk. It's too early to tell, but the signs are there that there may be an impact to the district's mission for good educational services with excellent educational outcomes. We have data that's indicating educational behavioral losses over the past few years. When money is not applied as planned, as the professionals behind you determine should be appropriate and hired for, we're losing some educational ground. And I think that's coming true a little bit, and we can see it in some of our educational report cards. So I really believe that we're starting to see the beginning of a correlation in unacceptable educational outcomes. Again, the board's going to have to monitor these outcomes closely into the future. I will also say this about capital. Our capital, when we appropriate capital, our capital goes through a subcommittee. If it's facilities, it goes through subcommittee, so we have a discussion about it. It's an individual item, and it goes through a subcommittee, it goes through the full board, and then it comes to you at the town council, and then it comes to the Board of Finance. So there's 4 or 5 checks and balances on how we spend capital. We don't bucket our capital requests into large, sets of wish lists sort of things. It's very specific when we approach capital requests. This again is about capital a little bit. So I think it's clear when the Board of Education has a well-funded capital reserve that it actively pursues improvements as that capital reserve budget allows. And an important note is that there are no BOE budgets funded by the taxpayers that are not delivered to the operations and care of the schools. They're always delivered to the school systems. And they're always looked at, do they fit within the mission statement? Again, I think the mayor has properly recognized the gap in the way major school capital projects are looked at and funded. And I think he's made really good strides in his administration in correcting for those gaps and in securing a high level of care and maintaining our buildings now and into the future. Obviously, the roof projects are important, the solar projects are important. These are things that the Board of Ed cannot fund because we simply just don't have those funds to do that, and they're bonded projects. I would like to say or illustrate a couple of threats to the budgets now and in the future. So we've talked about this, state mandates. So some people have said, if you opt out of the state mandates, is that a good idea? And I would say, I don't know. I mean, we get $14 million, around $14 million in educational cost sharing from the state. So if you want to start a fight with the state about their mandates, then you have to realize that that means that you could lose that funding, and you could also lose your accreditation. So that's not an easy thing to deal with, and I don't know if that's a wise thing to do. We've seen recently, and this is something where state legislatures and you as lobbyists can help us as well. We've seen student transportation price gouging by the carriers licensed to transport our special education students. I think this is going to continue, and these are risks to even this budget that we proposed, that those costs are going to continue to drive up if the legislators don't step in a little bit and say, put some ceilings on some of the costs that are available for sped transportation. Also, I think everyone's talked about in this past, but school bus transportation laws where every student has a guaranteed seat in the largest town in the state will continue to challenge us. I've heard it time and time again where we run buses that are half full. Well, that's because the laws say we have to run the buses half full. So this is going to continue to challenge the district unless the state legislators step up and create laws that would enable more flexibility and better overall cost to the district. Increases in teacher shortage areas or classification of teacher shortage areas. As teachers in shortage areas are not contractually obligated to abide by local union contracts, there's exceptions. That is a risk to our budget as well. So if we can't hire teachers, it's almost a free market condition for the teachers. They don't have to conform to contractual obligation. We have to hire them at a higher cost, and we're competing with other towns for those teachers. That's a real weird situation in the state of Connecticut, and it's also a bad situation in the state of Connecticut because the state of Connecticut is short 1,800 teachers at the moment, 1,800 or 2,000 teachers at the moment. So it's a very competitive market, and when we go to hire those teachers to fill our needs, we're probably going to be paying more for some of those shortage area teachers than we have in our contracts or and in our budget. So that's a risk. Also, increases in affordable housing in our district, they're approved as exceptions to existing zoning. And I just want to say this means that our population studies that show a steady student population, they might have a material weakness. Because when population studies are done, they look at the zoning laws that are on the books and the zoning maximum build-out sort of numbers. So anything that goes through the town as an exception to that zoning that can increase student population means that our population could grow. And if it does grow, and it grows in a significant way, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, we could be looking at, we need another school. So affordable housing, it's a good thing, but it comes with an economic cost, and it could be a dangerous thing to school budgets in the future. Also, we know that there's a larger amount of English as second language learners coming to our school district. If you look at some of the numbers, Hill and Plain has larger numbers. People are moving here, and a lot of them are English ESL students. So that also drives teacher costs as well, because we are state mandated to have a certain amount of ESL teachers available for the student population. And also our school lunch programs may take a hit in the future as well. Right now, the school lunch program funds itself to some extent, but it is going to drive the cost up, and either parents are going to be paying more for school lunches, or we're going to have to pay more for school lunches depending on state mandates in the future. So I think that's it as far as what I have for presentation. I will say one more thing about this slide. The projects on the right-hand side, the wastewater plan, the New Milford High School wood shop, the central office move to Sarah Noble, those were unplanned capital activities, so they were not in our 5-year plan. So they're exceptions that are hard to deal with. And I can't remember the year exactly, but Wendy will probably know this, that I think it was 2 years ago, our actual capital budget was down to $6,000. It was crazy. Like, we couldn't have fixed a fish tank if it broke in the high school biology lab. So on the one hand, some of these surpluses have been good for the Board of Education because it allows us to attack our capital projects a little more aggressively. But on the other hand, it eliminates some of our student services and some of the money that we need to educate our students. And now I'll just open it up. If anyone has any questions on the budget books themselves, one of us here will answer that question, hopefully to the best of our ability and to your satisfaction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the board for coming in and giving us a great presentation. I know you worked very hard at this. Welcome to Dr. Parlato, is that who you is?
Yes.
Welcome to the town of New Milford. You have come into a wonderful town. We obviously have some challenges, which we always have challenges in our wonderful little town, but we always rise to the occasion here. I've got a handful of initial questions and one comment. The last slide. Central office moved to Sarah Noble. How many years ago was it that we had a budget of $4 million to do that? I am thrilled that it's $100,000 right now.
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
Actually, the first proposal was $4 million. And we started off when Dr. Parker was the superintendent and did a back of the napkin kind of, this is what it'll take to do $120,000 just to get us over there, just to walk in the door. We then asked for a full proposal. That proposal was submitted to the board in the amount of $4,122,000, somewhere in that vicinity, by Dean Petroselli. The mayor and I had several conversations. Is it fair to say that's
Absolutely.
not going to work?
Correct.
I believe I sat in your lobby downstairs
Yep.
and said, we need to do better. Had the board acted on that proposal at the time that was submitted,
We would
We would've
have
spent
wasted $3.9 million,
exactly,
which
so
I
we
still
went back.
think $4 million, being in the construction industry, is ludicrous
Okay.
for an existing building retrofit.
So we're not done yet. We then went
I'm
back
sure.
after our conversation. We requested another bid and another proposal. Mr. Petroselli came back with the help of our facilities and our discussions. We've changed that proposal that was submitted to the Board of Education in the amount of $1,212,000, I believe, somewhere in that vicinity. And we are still working on that
So let me
for
ask you
a
a question.
final move.
The entire 2 floors or 3 floors of East Street are over there. They're functioning.
1283, I'm sorry, I was off $83, I apologize.
I'm not,
But-
we're not parsing the numbers.
Okay.
You've got the entire building moved to Sarah Noble,
We do
and it's
have,
working.
may I,
It's working.
may I caution you on that? You're absolutely right, it's working because we have to make it work. But when that move occurred, that was to get us over there. There are, you can imagine going from a $4 million proposal with all the bells and whistles down to the next level, which is $1.2 million, somewhere in between there and downwards. We need to make sure that we have some of the needs over there that need to be taken care of, whether it's walls or privacy or things of that nature. So there are, that 100,000 is phase one. It was to get us out of the building and get us into there. So I want to be completely transparent about that that is not the total ticket item. And that is why Mr. Petroselli came back after our conversations and said, we need to do better. Will that be the final number, $1.2 million? I hope not, and I don't think it will be. I think it will be less. But we're waiting for that next dollar amount to be brought forward based on facilities and that.
So
And that's
we
where
do
we are.
have our expert building committee also working with you to vet this out, because we have some, highly distinguished professionals on there that build on a daily basis like I do. I would love to see some of that when it comes. I've always been critical of that. I have.
I
I'm
believe
gonna
that
tell you
Mr.
right now out of the
Petroselli is
gate,
bringing forward
so that-
another
so
quote.
that I'm not pushing your budget. I understand the challenges that we have, but I have a lot of issues, and I know a lot of my fellow councilmen have a lot of issues. This is the small one.
Mm-hmm.
I have another minor one with just bus transportation, and it's about one item, and I brought it up here for almost 12 years. One bus stop on Route 7 is the most dangerous spot in this entire town for potential accidents. It's in front of the Beehive. I have mentioned this for years, to make the right onto State Road, pick those kids up and drop those kids off in the backyard so they don't have to cross the road, and then make the right back on Route 7. And I was told that the bus company has an issue with that it now somehow makes the price go up because they make a right turn and another right turn. We had a lively discussion here in the town council room, I don't know, maybe a month ago, about this. It blocks the road for a good 10 minutes. I have been in the middle of situations on a sunny day or an afternoon day, driving over the top riding with other cars, to out of the corner of your eye, you see the bus, and people lock it up in the middle of Route 7. It's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous practice to pick those kids up on Route 7 at that time, especially in the middle of the day. You have a lot of traffic. It clogs up Route 7 for about 10 to 12 minutes. I've sat there and timed it. So this is not a budget comment on you guys. It's somebody has got to bring the bus company in amongst us so they can hear our concerns. Because I've had a lot of parents who've said, this is a dangerous situation, especially when they're kids that don't pay attention as much as adults, leaving the high school at the same time that bus is coming, are not paying attention when they come over it. They're excited about going on their afternoon. So That's a transportation problem. I don't have any other issues with them. It's that one spot. It's extremely dangerous, Pete. Please.
So, no. So Tom, I did watch that town council meeting, and I did reach out to Anthony, and we're looking at that. So
It's got to be, Pete, I don't
we-
mean to
so
put the
we-
wood to you.
we-
It's got to be more than a look at.
Yeah.
Anthony, this has been, I have talked about this in this room for almost 8 years.
But-
Especially the first time I slid to a grinding halt and almost hit 3 people in front of me and other people back. I've done this with 2 police chiefs. We have to solve this problem
Yeah.
for the safety of the kids and for the traffic flow into Milford so that people don't get into these.
again, it's
contentious
not a budget conversation.
bit, right.
But
I normally don't ask you that many
No,
budget
no,
numbers.
I get it. But
I'm
we-
asking about policy
look,
here.
No, so we've heard that concern.
Okay.
But we're going to address that concern.
Okay, please,
All
that,
right?
that is a very dear to the hearts of the folks in this room.
No, I understand. And then, Route 7's a little bit of a nightmare in this town.
Yes. It could be a little bit less if those poor kids weren't in harm's way
As
there.
we see on a
Joe?
regular basis on Facebook.
I'm gonna give up the floor to my colleagues.
All right.
Joe?
Thank you for coming. I do appreciate all you guys do. I know of the Board of Finance, Town Council, the Board of Ed is probably, you have a much greater weight on your shoulders and a lot more responsibility, so I do appreciate all the hard work. I have so many questions. I'm gonna try to pare it down and just piggyback on the one question Tom had about your move, just to kind of keep the conversation going on that lineup, because I do have a lot of questions. Now, in full disclosure, the job that I just took, Silver Petroselli is an architect on one of the projects that I'm working on, and I wasn't aware that they were the architect that was working for you guys. So I haven't had an official conversation with them regarding it, but I just wanted to kind of clear the table with that, and full disclosure. And I would like to see the plans, and see what they have presented to you to kind of see
So I
if.
think before I forget, all of the plans that are submitted to the board, they're also attached to the agendas. I have extra copies, and I have floor plans for all of the buildings as well, and I have extra copies. But with the next set of plans that come out, Joe, if I remember, I'll give you a shout and let you know, because they're attached.
Thank you.
So if there's a proposal, of course.
So,
Right.
Joe, in a general sense, the board, and I haven't been on the board 8 years. I've only been on the board at 3, a little over 3 at this point. So I've seen some of this, 4 million. We know that the town is not going to. That's too much for the town to chew on. Even the 1.2, we're like, as a matter of fact, Matt made some good suggestions about how to reduce that cost, and so we're cognizant of, we want something that's reasonable and professional, of course, because these are educational professionals, so they should have a professional sort of setting to work in. And we're still working on it. We're still working on that, to hone it to something that we think that the town can accept and that is fiscally responsible. And this has been ongoing. I think we've been talking about this for 3 years at this point. I've heard about it for 3 years, because the first.
December 2019.
Yeah, because I heard about it from Dr. Parker when she was our superintendent, and I was like, well,
So-
that's not gonna work either, but.
So, in terms of the move, right? You moved out of East Street, which was a larger space or a similarly sized space?
Square footage wise, I don't have it, the square footage.
Okay. And to convert East Street into what you needed, what
See the
was,
total square
what
footage?
would the difference be in terms of the cost? If
I
you
have
were to
square
fully
footage,
renovate
yes.
East Street
The-
versus
the-
moving to
Well,
Sarah?
if you were gonna retrofit East Street, then the only estimate we have is the 4 point whatever, right?
The recent estimate, so
No, just for East Street, so that's the
Right.
only one we have for East Street renovation is
I
the.
have it behind me, but
Okay.
I'll just give you the verbal. Basically, in 2007, the first full report commissioned regarding East Street was the Savigny report. The second report that was given to the board was the Esposito design report. The third report that was given to the board was the KD&G in 2017 is the most recent, just so you know. And all of these, every single one, were over $5 million, if not more. Okay?
Right.
They were broken down in components of just the last one which was under the Brownback administration when this came forward, just the ADA compliance alone was $4.6 million of
Right.
East Street.
But that wouldn't be just for the Board of Ed, right? There would be other facilities that would also be able to be used.
It would be for East Street School.
East Street School, but that could house other
Of
town.
course.
Like it
There-
could have
of
social
course.
services
It
or the
used
youth
to.
agency or something else.
And it
utilize that
did,
building.
and it did.
It used to have
So-
social services and youth agency.
The
in that
Savigny
building, so.
report, which I have the hard copy of, not in a binder, which came out in 2000, the Esposito design report came out in 2010, that had a comparison of just moving East Street offices, administrative, over to Pettibone, what the cost would be.
Right.
And that cost, I'll get it for you exactly to go on the record, was, I believe it was somewhere in the vicinity of I'd have to get it, and I'll get it before the meeting's over. It's right here. July 2010. So the cost to move East Street to Pettibone in 2010, that actual cost was, I believe it was just over $1 million in 2010,
Okay,
okay?
right.
To give you
Yep.
a snapshot of
And-
that.
And what triggered the move from the East Street building to Sarah Noble? Because that was kind of an abrupt thing, right? Because I know
Adverse working conditions,
adverse working conditions, because of
the temperature.
the temperature.
Temperature in the building was, you can't get it over 65 when it's really cold out.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, it was probably colder than that on many occasions.
Thank you.
And I think the board felt that it was unconscionable to have our district staff working in those conditions. We said we have to do something.
And that was the result of something with the boiler, I think, the.
That was,
the
look.
Department of
yeah,
Public Works.
So
had
I know
mentioned.
everyone likes to talk about that boiler, and 2017 or 18, Wendy probably knows this better than I do. But 2017 or 18, we asked for a new boiler, and it was cut from the budget. Everyone knows that that building's over 100 years old. You could replace the boiler. It doesn't necessarily make the building better because it needs roof work, it needs all kinds of other things. So if the town wanted to do it right, they're gonna have to spend like $5 million to renovate that building, right? So at the point in time when the boiler was cut from the budget, the words that were used were, let's not throw good money after bad, and those were the words that were used at the time. I mean, back then, the boiler was $80,000, it's probably $130,000, $140,000 now. You could simply replace the boiler, but nobody had the will to go do that, because they really, I think the sense is that, and the mayor had said this in the December meeting, that, the town would like that building back at this point, because we're not making full utilization of it. The Board of Education can't make full utilization of it, because the building's a little bit too big square footage-wise for our needs, so.
So the decision was made to move for $100,000, right? Instead of fixing the boiler for $130,000, which would have allowed you to stay in East Street, right?
Temporarily, yeah.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
And what was the $100,000 for the move spent on? Was that like U-Haul trucks and a moving company, or?
I don't,
Yeah, moving costs associated with that. And, over at Sarah Noble now, think of it, offices moving into open classrooms. With the director's office that has partitions, and then everybody else kind of bullpen style. So
there
this
was
is-
obviously IT involved.
Right.
We had to move some of the IT over there. There's security access to that door, the front door. You have to be buzzed in to the district offices, and that didn't exist over in that little side section of the Sarah Noble.
Is it like a storefront door with,
It's a
lockout, maglock or something?
it's a
Fingerprint reader,
lockdown
card
door
reader or
where
something.
you have to have, push button access.
And if I could, the plan for spending the $100,000 was separated by category, and that went through Facilities Subcommittee and Operations Subcommittee of the board before the board made its request from Town Council and Board of Finance to withdraw the $100,000 from the capital reserve account.
Right. And you didn't move until after the funds were approved?
I'm not sure of the exact dates.
The date of the capital reserve withdrawal was, I believe it was in December, last I saw the minutes. But
I thought the activity started in November, or late October, early November was when the facilities.
And when did we
started
approve the funds for the transfer?
I think it was December. Was it December? Yeah, I think it was.
It was, I think it was. It had to be-
January, I think, right?
It was in
It was either
December,
right before
because
Christmas or right after
So,
Christmas.
so the move was not done in one day. In other words, it was done in increments. We did have employees that moved out of East Street a year and a half ago over to Sarah Noble. the special education department had moved out. So it's not as if a number was brought forward and said, approve it. We were, correct me if I'm wrong, but we also had concerns about keeping the heat running and keeping that building functioning and making sure
Oh, yeah,
our
you
staff
can't-
was safe.
You
So I
can't
just
keep
want to be
people in there if
clear.
it's under 65.
So those expenditures went through all approvals in all committee, in all fairness, so.
I mean, you had it in surplus, so it's not like, you know.
So, careful with that. We've had recent surpluses, yes, but when we were talking about this, we got down to $6,000 in our capital reserve fund. You can't do anything with that. You can't, I mean, but that's not gonna even pay for 1/10 of a boiler.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand, but like, I'm looking at the previous budgets, right? I mean, you just had a whole thing there. We had $3 million last year, $2 million the year before. I mean, some of those funds could have been utilized to, you know, do needed upgrades to like the East Street School, right?
Yeah, I think, I'm gonna ask a question, because I think, I'm trying to recall correctly, that there was a facilities use committee that I think you were on, and
was,
I think Mike Sinella was on, and others were on, and.
I was
and-
on.
And when Wendy was on, and I think at that point in time, I think that at that point in
I
time
might
that.
pick that up, Tom, so.
There was a recommendation at that point in time to make better use of the East Street School and to invest in it. But over that
behind it
time frame, that investment never happened, right? So the facilities use recommendation was not accepted. For some reason, shape, or form, it was not accepted because I think there would have been momentum and motion towards renovating that structure. And Paul, I mean, there are some really nice stained glass. I mean, that is a cool
beautiful
building.
building.
I think I think this is an opportunity for the town and the board and anybody watching this collectively. If you go back and look at the history of East Street and Pettibone, there's folders upon minutes. Some of you have come before the Board of Education, giving your opinions on what we should do. We began and we had 3 administrations go through this issue. Mayor Murphy, Mayor Grombeck, Mayor Bass. We had different philosophies that came in with those administrations, okay? In 2016, Mayor Grombeck came to the Board of Education and basically said, I have a MOU for you and we're gonna make it happen and we're gonna move you over to Pettibone. That MOU changed 4 months later. Many of you were there, okay? Now the Board of Ed and the building, they're in limbo. Now we go back, Mayor Bass is elected. Mayor Bass, we're going to eventually get this resolved. All of our capital expenditures, and we're looking at that. But this building of East Street that was turned over in 1980 for administrative purposes, a building that's 90 years old, I truly hope that outside the budget, with everybody sitting here at the table, we're getting older here, we're running out of time, we owe it to the public to solve what we're gonna do with these 2 buildings.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And I cannot tell you, after reading these minutes all day on Saturday, over 8 hours of listening to some of the commentary, that it's time to resolve this. And there's enough participation about East Street to go around in Pettibone. Those are 3 reports. That does not count the 17 times that East Street was brought onto the Board of Education agendas in the last 2 years. So,
We kind of digressed from the budget, right?
We did.
And I apologize for poking that bear, right? So I want to kind of, the reason for my asking is that I have students that are in the school district, right? And I know that there are other concerns with having the Board of Education in a school building, right? You might have parents who might have restricted access going to the Board of Education. You might have students who are restricted access coming into to visit the Board of Education for whatever the reason may be, right? And safety is always a top priority for the schools, Personally, as a parent who has children in the district, I'd prefer to see the Board of Education operating out of a different building, right? And that's just my personal opinion, Financially, I understand that decisions have to be made, so I want to understand the economics of the issue as much as possible, right? That's,
Those economics
just,
those economics are gonna evolve over time.
right.
Yeah,
And I think that these are all
It's
great
clearly not
things to hear.
finalized, right?
Yeah,
So,
nothing's finalized.
yeah.
But anyway, I have other questions, but I don't wanna take over
Okay.
the whole floor, so.
Would like to ask the board a question? Doug?
Thanks to the OE members, thank you for coming. I just, on page 9, obviously Pete or Wendy or
A
someone's not here.
page question.
Project lead the way for upgrades, that 50,000, is that toward the field?
It's page 9 of this, Wendy.
Of this one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just got excited. She got the-
I was like. I just put that away. Page of them.
What was the question again?
On page 9, you'll see on the bottom, on the left, project lead the way upgrades. You see the $50,000 there? And that's toward what? Is that toward the field?
It's technology.
Okay. Is there a place? Okay, is there a place in the budget for the field? I know you're contributing $50,000 each year.
Actually, we do, and
Right.
I can give you exactly, we contributed 50,000, and as a matter of fact, the last operations report will show the contribution, Anthony. So just so you have it, and thank you, because that's another collaboration, that's a promise that we've all made to the taxpayer, and we're doing it, town and board. So basically, right now, the balance in the turf field is $365,880. That's as of December 31st. The contributions from the board are $50,000, and the town. The board in 2020, 2021 end of year balance put in 100,000 into that account. So we now, that is where we're at, 365.
365. Is that in this year?
That's,
It's not.
It is not.
It is not, because that is not that those are funds that are put into the capital account, similar to how the town does it. So the capital reserve is not part of an operational budget,
Okay.
okay?
it's a locked out fund.
Right. Is there a way that we
As you
could-
know, just like
is there a way we could add that so we could see it and the public could see how much is in there?
Absolutely, if you go to, I can tell you, but
Sure.
we're happy to take suggestions, it's all about process.
Sure.
So if you go to any operations agenda or Board of Education agenda and look through monthly reports.
It's always in there.
It's always attached.
Okay.
The last one that we have is December, because in the month of January, we didn't, have subcommittee, and I do not have the February with me, so. That's just, but that is accurate.
I appreciate it.
It's a-
Yeah, I
it's-
couldn't find it, and then I thought I saw the 50, and I said,
You
well, maybe
panicked?
that's
No, Doug.
maybe
you got
that's the
more than
50,
that.
but
No.
it's somewhere else. But I'm glad to hear that you guys are contributing and that
And the town
amount.
as well.
Also,
Oh, yeah.
if somebody wants to contribute to that field, Mr. Lipinski has a brick program, so buy a brick. It's a way that'll help fund that field in the future as well, so.
Somebody bring that to like a town council meeting so we can announce it to the, I mean, I know people are hearing it now, but that's a great program. I think a lot of
We've
people
actually,
participate.
on the turf committee,
Yeah.
which is appointed by the town, we had the last meeting, we haven't met in a while, but the last meeting, when that finally came to fruition, we were gonna bring that over to the town council, push that out.
And by the way, the kids at school love that program
Yeah,
as
I'm
well.
sure
They
they do.
want to do that, so.
I'm very happy to hear that lockbox has stayed in place, because it
Yeah.
was one of my
It has to.
my
It has
points. I
to.
know everybody heard loud and clear
Yeah.
then, we have to make sure that field is, it's one of the prides and joys of the town. And
well,
the fact,
and-
quite frankly, having the graduation there thrills me beyond belief. My daughter was the first one, and I'm glad it's going to stay there, and I hope we can continue to keep it here. Any
Yeah.
of those events out of town, I do not think are good for New Milford. I think it's better for the kids to be right
Yeah.
here.
And we do get reports on that field from our facilities director, and that field is being maintained
Beautiful.
really well. And because of that maintenance level, it looks like it's going to extend the life, so that it should be, the numbers that we have in there earmarked to, redo that at some point in time, we should be okay with that, I think.
That's great.
So, I know that's a little plug for Matt Cunningham behind me, but
Absolutely.
doing a great job maintaining that field,
Hillary?
those fields.
That was my question, is what is the goal, what is the target when we stop collecting those 50?
I don't think,
It's replacement.
Yeah, it's a replacement.
It's funny, many of us here served on that committee, so, I think the target was 10 to 15 years, Doug, could be wrong?
It was, and at the time, I think, well, the larger field, the main field, is 100,000 square feet, and the north field is 80,000. I think it was about And that was at the time when I was speaking to the people, I believe it was Allen up there in Massachusetts. It was about $825,000 to replace it, so they can recycle the seating
fill.
or the encapsulation stuff. They take it
Right.
out, they replace the field, and they put it back in. So those are the conversations. Obviously, in another 8-9 years, the cost sure would go up, but this would help
I
offset.
don't, that's interesting, because there's the conversation out there, the cost on that may be stabilizing because it's more competitive. I don't really know. But I do know that we had a target in place of 10 to 12 years, and we're probably very close to that.
It's a good collaborative plan that was put in play,
Yep.
and it's in a lockbox, so
That's great.
that's great.
Questions? Alex?
Thank you. So nice to see you all again. I was at all your hearings, so I don't necessarily have questions as much as I would like something highlighted, if possible. We heard from some of the other agencies in town during this process how important it is that we take care of everyone's mental health. And the mental health of our students has been coming up again and again and again. Youth agency, social services, park and rec, everyone, library included. And I know that during your presentations, we heard about things that were being done, particularly at Schaghticoke, about the culture of the school. Is there anything that you can identify in the budget that would help us see that you are investing in school culture for Schaghticoke? I know those dollars are little. It's more the people, and I get it, because it is the people, and the people are important. But
I'm
is it-
gonna say something first, and then I'll let Dr. Parletto jump in, but I think because of COVID, the board recognized that we were gonna have some significant behavioral issues coming out of COVID, and so a lot of our ESSER funding is applied towards behavioral interventionists and more social support personnel for the school system. And I don't have the ESSER funds in front of me, but I believe most of it is, a lot of it is applied towards that goal, knowing that we would have had problems coming out, and we do. So I don't know if Dr. Parletto wants to add to that.
No, I was going to say the same thing about the ESSER funds
Yes.
and the personnel that we're able to add.
We have quite a
Using those
bit.
funds.
To give you an idea, we have interventionists at Hill and Plain, Northville, Sarah Noble. We have coordinators for math, K-5, literacy, math 612. We have counselors at Hill and Plain, Northville, Schaghticoke. There have been tech integration specialists. Those support services, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, as you know, is done in stages. Those support services flowed throughout all of the ESSERs because we put those supports into the interventionists and those type of supports.
What's ESSER again? Just
It's the school-based term for ARPA.
gotcha.
I hope that's helpful.
Good evening. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions on the students.
Oh, yes.
How many students do we have combined in all the schools?
If you look in your, I'll give it to you, but if you look in the appendix.
I'm coming up with 3,655. And I'd just like to know how many SPED children that we have, how many STEM children, and how many of the SPED children are we sending out of town?
We
for the
currently have
transportation?
3,663 students in this
63?
budget that you see. The projected in this coming budget is 3,675.
Okay, 75. Okay. And how many of those are SPED and STEM?
603.
Thank you.
603 now?
There we go.
603. Okay. And out of that 603, how many of them are being transported by bus out of the area that we're having a problem with, money-wise?
Out of district, is that your question, Paul?
Yeah,
Right, Laura, do you have that
Yeah,
number?
35 approximately.
35, okay, all right. People always ask me these questions, and I don't have the answers.
They're good questions.
Okay. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. I couldn't find it.
Thank you, Laura.
All right.
I have some questions.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Chris?
Let's let Chris go.
Yep, okay, thank you. I've got a few, so please bear with me. I'll start off with what I think is my highest priority these days, and I hope is for everybody in the room. And my first question is kind of similar to what Alex just asked, but we have an anti-bullying program in the schools. What is our budget for that?
A directly attributed budget to bullying in schools? I don't think there's a direct budget application to that. I believe that there's policies and procedures that are incorporated into the school system, and that's, when you talk about bullying in the schools, it's everyone's responsibility. So it flows from, the teachers in the hallways during the day to, all the way up to administration. So it's, there's not a specific dollar amount associated with an anti-bullying. We are looking at some of those things to see if we can enhance that to some extent with maybe additional cameras in the hallways and stuff like that. But I don't know of any specific dollar, and I'm looking at Anthony or Wendy, because I don't have a sense of that, but I don't think there are specific dollar amounts.
There are lessons that are implemented K-12 about positive peer relationships and self-esteem, but there isn't a specific program. I think that's what you're referencing.
I'm referencing, any dollars tied specifically for anti-bullying.
So I don't think there is, Chris. I hope that, I don't know that answers your question, but I hope it answers your concern.
Yeah, well, so I guess that leads me, I know we have a program, and I know we have to share results with the state Department of Ed every year. Can you share any of those results here tonight?
I think we could take an action to get those results, but I don't think I'm not prepared to answer that, and I don't think Dr. Parlato is prepared to answer that.
Are you talking about student achievement results?
I'm sorry?
What kind of results are you looking for specifically?
Well, we have to report to the State Department of Ed every year, right, on our anti-bullying, correct?
We have to report on the number of verified acts of bullying, for sure. We have to report on the number of discipline events in the school every year.
Right. And it's just those two figures, that's it?
Well, those are two of the major ones related to school climate and mean behavior and bullying, for sure.
Okay. So then, how do you all feel the results of our program? Do you think it's effective?
You know what? We had some parents come out and speak in public. I think that there's more that we need to do, that there's more that we should do in that regards. Yeah. But that public input was a week ago.
Yes.
So we take that public input seriously, and we're looking at some of those things at this point. Dr. Parlato's been with us for 2 weeks. She's well aware, and she's looking at that. So, yeah, we're looking at it, Chris.
Okay, great. And who's the district's safe school climate coordinator?
That would be me.
Yeah, Ms. Hollander is our assistant superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'm spending time on this because obviously I think it's something I've been getting discussions from parents, concerned parents, and the public speakers at your last meeting were just, I'm sure we're all as heartbroken as they are. So if there's anything we can do, and it's not just a school problem, it's a town problem. And I think we have a part of the solution on the town side as well. And I would love to see us work together, maybe a joint task force or something to get together and solve it. But I guess let me move on to some other questions.
May I say one thing first? Sorry. May I say one thing first?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just so you know, this is my 7th day, but so far in my 7th day regarding looking at school climate as a whole, we're looking at policy specifically. We've already, I've talked to the board about that. We're looking at personnel at the schools and how we can deploy them better. We're looking specifically at rules and regulations in the school and making sure they're implemented consistently and firmly. We're looking at the lessons that students receive grades K to 12 in being a kind human and participating as a member of a community. And we're looking at specific facilities and security things as well. So definitely been working on it for the last 7 days every day because that's how serious we're taking that.
That's great to hear. I'm very happy to hear that. And I know there's a lot of work ahead of us. There's probably more work ahead of us than behind us, but it's just as one person on the council, I would certainly be willing to pitch in anywhere we can. And I think my colleagues on the town side want to do everything we can to put an end to this.
I'm so happy to hear about that collaboration, truly. It's a wonderful thing to hear.
Great. So getting on to other more mundane dollars and cents things. Can you provide a line item or by line item what you spent the federal COVID money on?
Yes.
Yep. COVID or the ESSERs you talking
Are you talking about the ESSER funding?
about? ESSER or COVID?
I think it's the ESSER. It's your version of our ARPA money.
Yes, that's ESSER 1, 2, and 3.
Yep, we'll be providing those through the Board of Education subcommittees as we close out those grants and complete those expenditures.
You don't have any of that now?
What do you
But
looking
I think
for
everything has
specifically?
been at least allocated, right? It may not be
Allocated
spent,
between
but
spend.
Yeah, we have a budget for each one of those. I don't have the actual expenditures by line item against them.
But they've been budgeted. That was part of the readout that I gave and read off.
Yep.
But we do have them by line item, of course. Would you like me to read off? There's 4 pages of them, but.
No.
Yeah, I mean, can you share it on the screen here, and I can actually take a screen capture of it?
We don't have it in
we're not
presentation
prepared.
format.
Yeah.
The ESSER 1 funding to New Milford Public Schools was roughly $269,000. ESSER 2 was in the amount of
1-3.
$1,333,000 roughly. And the ESSER 3 funding stretched over 2 years was an additional $2,588,000.
Right, but I guess what I'm looking at is what was it spent on? And specifically, I'm looking to see what was spent on maybe personnel versus, I don't know, Chromebooks or whatever.
I don't have that breakout right here with me tonight. There was
Anthony,
amounts.
could you send it and I'll disperse it to everybody?
We'll do that. We'll send you the spreadsheet that we have. When we were presented this, each time it came through, it was presented through in draft form. The board discussed it and went through all of this. But we'll get that to you, of course.
Okay, thank you. And then for budget surpluses the last few years, can you identify what that money was spent on?
I can tell you the budget surpluses, and then I can give you some examples of capital. You would put that up on the screen just this last year, just this last time alone. So the end of the year balances, to give you an idea, and then I'll try and break down what we've done. Okay, so the end of the year balances, as you can see by the slide that was presented earlier, I'll go back to 2012 and just run through it quickly. End of the year balance, 770,680, 237. It's on the slide that you see in front of you. What I did was I drilled back to 2001. And these numbers fluctuate because in 2011, we had a $32,000 end of the year balance. 2010, we had $3,092 left over at a $56 million budget, a 0.01% increment.
But I guess I'm looking to see, so it's great, I see the end of the year balance there, but where was that money spent is what I'm looking for.
So if you take a look at the last 3 years, which is predominantly the balances that are going into our capital reserve and building that up, those capital items all came through the town and the Board of Finance, and they're approved by the town, each and every one of them. The ones that you saw on the slide, some of the major ones, the Scotticoke elevator, $225,000. The security camera upgrades, $220,000. We had playground compliances. We had infrastructure upgrades at $86,000.
Yeah, Wendy, I guess, but that's gonna be hard to add up. And with all due respect, I did send some of these questions in on January 16th. So I was hoping to get kind of an itemized accounting of where.
I didn't know what Chris was asking for at that point. Look,
Anthony, can you just
The total
send the
amount that
information
was,
to everybody?
the total amount that was more recently withdrawn from capital reserve, except for the bucket on the right side, which was the non-routine emergency type items, totaled $980,000. And they all had individually identified projects, and that came through subcommittee, board,
Last year.
and then town council and board of finance for approval.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, Chris, on that. It's
Last
Walter. The last year's end-of-year balance, if you could put that slide back up again, Pete. Yeah, that 3 million. All those were subject to audit, and last year's audit wasn't completed until December of '22, and it didn't go through the approval of the Board of Finance to the end of January. So they just received those $3 million. That's hasn't been spent yet. They just got it in their checkbook or account, capital reserve account in the last 6 weeks or so.
Okay, yep, fair enough on that 1 year. Okay, let me, I guess, move on. So another different topic. We know Danbury schools are being overpopulated. And it's my belief that I think, their residents could very well be spilling over into Brookfield and New Milford. What are we doing to ensure the residency of all new students?
Well, I don't understand that question completely, Chris. But,
Yeah, we did.
Would you
We
like?
did. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, it's Holly. That's something that my office takes care of, and we are diligent with the support of Maria, looking at ensuring that our students that go to New Milford live in New Milford. And we have worked tirelessly in those areas in which we are curious about residency and have followed through and have actually supported families in going to school in the districts in which they really live. So we are on that monthly, checking and ensuring that we have the residents that we know of course. If there's any questions, we're questioning it and asking for proof of residency on a regular basis.
If necessary,
Great, thank you.
if necessary, we'll complete investigation of that, so that we are able to demonstrate if the child lives here or not.
We've acted on that before.
Great. Okay, great, thank you. I noticed a significant decline in the population at SMS. Why are we not eliminating a teaching position with that decline in student population?
I don't know which specific number you're talking about, Chris, but let's say, as an example, if there was a SMS reduction of 40 students total, that doesn't mean that the 40 students total are in one classroom. You could have
Right.
you could have that banded, so you could have one student in one classroom and another student in another classroom, and you could have them at different grade levels. So you might have a reduction in a classroom of 1 or 2 students, but it's not 40. It's not a number of 40. The math doesn't work out that easy. All right?
The number, I believe, is 34. It's 34,
So 30
and you have that dispersed across teams, so it's, if I could,
Yeah,
3 teams.
I certainly appreciate what you're saying, but let me be devil's advocate here. Because head count, I mean, that's the graph you put up, 77% of your budget goes to salary and benefits.
Absolutely.
Right? So every head count we add, it's a fairly significant burden to the taxpayer. And so, but in the 2 elementary schools, student population is rising just a little bit, and we're adding teachers there. So I would just, I'm just questioning it because I just want to make sure that, we're diligent before we add headcount, because Because that's,
I-
again, we're gonna add $300,000 to the budget for new teachers.
Well,
It's
this
not
is just my opinion. On Scotticoke alone, that is one school we do not want to reduce staff. It's a middle school, and we're sending a mixed message. That's just my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. Can you explain, there's a $1.1 million increase in other services. What is that?
Special education is other, transportation is other. Hold on, let me get it for you.
Anthony, you gonna take a stab at that one?
Fees, supplies, transportation.
Yep. I'll get it too.
So specifically in other services, 930,000 of that is directly related to transportation. So 438,000 of the 930 is directly related to transportation from out-of-district placements.
Oh, is that covering, because didn't last year we supposedly had some savings in transportation?
In gen ed transportation, yes.
This is special,
So,
this is out of district.
so what we took out last year is being added back plus then some again, I guess, right?
I want to be careful with that, because the savings that we had in general transportation was because the bus company didn't have enough bus drivers, and so we recovered some of those funds by going to the bus company and saying, hey, you didn't make a bus run, and we had a lot of angry parents because we didn't have bus runs. So, you know, that's a two-edged sword to discuss that transportation cost in a very, finite way like that. It ended up being a lot of angry parents.
We
I'll
also,
say it that way.
just for the record, last year at budget reduction, we did take 2 buses offline in the cost of $69,000 a bus that had been reduced. So we felt that we could consolidate. It's not always perfect because, we want our buses, we have to supply our buses, but our buses are, in some routes, they're full. So we did reduce the number of buses by 2, I believe, last year. Is that correct?
Correct, but to answer his question, like, right on the head of it, the other services, when you see it going up, 1,158,000, 930,000 of that is directly because of transportation. Another half of that 438 is directly sped transportation. Another 438 is directly the new contract with All-Star Transportation for busing, gen ed busing. And then the remainder, roughly $44,000, is increased transportation at Scotticoke and the high school for athletic events specifically.
Exactly.
So when you're looking at other services, 1.1 million going up, 930 of that is directly just transportation across those 3 categories.
And that's still the 2 buses.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Chris. Joe?
Okay. So, it's,
I'm sorry, Joe.
oh,
Katie, do you want to
Go ahead.
First
I had
round,
asked.
sorry.
oh,
Drop,
sorry.
it's okay.
Sorry about it.
Welcome to our new Superintendent Parlato. How are you? Thank you very much. And everybody else. I want to go back to the verified acts of bullying, which you seem to be quite up on. I'm glad about that. What was the number that we reported last year?
That I have to find out. That wasn't in my first
Well, I mean,
set
I
of-
wasn't trying to,
Yes.
but I'm going to look at the people who were here last year.
Yeah.
So how many did you report? Who would that fall to? Is that Laura?
I don't,
No.
no,
Holly?
it would be us. I mean, I don't have that in front of me. I
Okay,
apologize.
well, I now have 5 things here that we don't have the information on. So I just want to remind everybody that we can come back on Monday, because what happens is we all leave here to discuss and think about what we're going to do, and some of these are really important questions. So I understand maybe you don't have everything right in front of you, but it's a really hot topic right now, and I think you all know that. So what would you say is the amount of your budget put towards programs? You won't be specific by school, but just in general, programs. Where would you say that your programming to help everybody in the school, aside from the students, or maybe to help them too, if you want to put the counselors in there, that you are putting towards that? Where would you put that in the priority of your spending? I know you don't have a line item, but it's a very, we're all sitting here in the room, and every single person here and the people at home are thinking about this, and it's been brought up a lot lately. So it's a really important thing to the children, obviously, but I think it would be good for everybody if we could put some figures on this. And I'm not challenging you that you're not doing enough. I just would like to hear it, because parents ask you, what would you say? Where does that fall in the fiscal priority list? I don't know which one of you is.
I don't quite understand your question, Katie.
Okay. We have bullying going on in every single
Okay.
school, every age, okay? We have upset parents, we have upset teachers, and we have really, really upset and hurt and possibly impaired in ways because of bullying, kids who aren't going to go to school. I want to know, in your budget, where fiscally would you say what you're going to put towards fixing this problem, where does that fall? I already know how much you're going to spend on every type of busing you're going to do. Is that more important than what happens when it comes to the bullying and ultimately the mental health, physical health of children? Of course it does, and I don't think you think that. But I just want somebody to say something about it. You must have some grasp on it.
Okay, so what we talked about before, there was a question before, was is there a specific dollar amount applied to bullying? And the answer was no.
I'm not asking for specific. I know
Okay.
Chris asked the question. I'm asking you if somebody here has some idea. I just heard how much you spend on buses. Approximately how much do you think, where do you think this ends up?
Some of that, absolutely, Katie. Hold
I
on.
think, if it's okay, Holly and I'll elaborate a little bit on that.
I would, yes, and that's what I'd like, Laura. I don't want to just, you don't have, I said it doesn't have to be a dollar, but give me some sense and give the community some sense of where you are putting this. We've talked about an awful lot in the last hour and 15 minutes, and at home, people are probably getting tired of watching us, but let's just talk a little bit about what you're doing about it. And Laura, you, Holly, talk about it.
Okay, well, I'll start with staffing.
Ms. Parlato.
I don't have a dollar amount for the staffing, obviously, but there's 6 full-time social workers in the district. We work very closely with our parents, with our students, with mental health issues. We have 6 guidance counselors. Actually, we have more than that. 6 at the high school.
When you say guidance, Laura?
15 guidance counselors.
Okay, and that means those are the guidance counselors like we have at the high school to help them determine where they're going to go to school.
Well, that's for the high school, but at the lower
Yeah.
grades, they work a lot on mental health. They go into classrooms.
And you
they
have
do
how
into-
many altogether in all the schools? 15?
Yeah.
Okay. And you had
Altogether.
six counselors?
We have, 6 counselors at New Milford High School, 4.5 at Scotticoke, 2.5 at Sarah Noble, 1.5 at Northville, and 1.5 at Hill and Plain, with a total of 15.
That's the guidance? Is that the
Guidance
staff
counselors.
you first mentioned when you said there were 6?
There are 6 social workers.
Social workers, okay,
Mhm.
so we're, just curious, how many of those are in Scotticoke?
2.
And Sarah Noble?
Sarah Noble, 1,
Okay,
and then 2 at the high school.
Okay.
So as the grades goes up, the population
Right.
goes up, and the needs go up. We also have Effective School Solutions at the middle school. It's a wraparound, very therapeutic model for students who are very much of a trauma-based type model. They work a lot with outside agencies, they work with families, they provide counseling, they work with medical experts, and that
Okay.
is our 7th year in the district with ESS.
and I want to just go back to something you just said. As the children get older, so you increased, the difference in age between the high school and Scotticoke, it's quite a bit. I was in a 2nd grade class at Northville today, so right across the way is what, 6th? Said, okay, versus the high school. The number of people who speak about how their children are taunted and et cetera at Scotticoke really is a lot more than anybody's ever said to me about the high school. Now, I'm not second guessing how you, it's what you do and you know what you're doing. But I think if there's ever some place you would like to think about maybe putting a little bit more funding, and we talk about having a teacher and not having a teacher and not spending that money if they're declining in enrollment, nothing could be more important than this. And I know you know that, and I'm not telling you something you don't know, but I would just feel so much better if it became public. I know you have access to these people, and children do, and the parents probably do, but do they know it? Do they know how to get there? Because it's a traumatizing thing for the child, and then a parent is angry, and then they don't, or maybe they don't know what to do. So you've heard them all at your meetings. I just think that maybe a more user-friendly way, and if that means you need to spend some money to bring somebody in to be that user-friendly liaison, I think it would be very well received by a lot of people. So back to where I was saying, the priority. I have no doubt it's a priority for you guys. I just, in the scope of the board and all the schools, I just wanted to say, do you have something higher priority than that? I know you have to keep the lights on, but if no one can put a dollar value on it, I guess because it's money that's going to make the needed resources available. And if we don't have a way to even think where it lands, how do we know how to get people there to help? I mean, those are rhetorical things, Laura. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, if you would like, I can also have Mrs. Hollander talk about our school-based health centers that are really a heavy focus on mental health at all of our schools now.
And how does a child, just for my edification quickly, how does a child find out about that, or a parent find out about that?
So that was something that was initiated through the ESSER funding. And so we are up and running in all 5 schools. It rolled out initially first at the high school and the middle school. With every opening, we had information sessions for families. And then the clinician herself, there are 3 clinicians at this point, reach out to families as needed, whether it's the recommendation of the school leader or the family themselves ask for it. And the great thing about this is that no child will be refused services based on the inability to pay.
Okay.
So, at this, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, what does it? Do the children get this information? You said families.
No,
so
families. We had information sessions at each school.
So when the school is in session, if I'm a child in school at one of these schools, do you bring them into the assembly and tell them about it?
No, that's not how it was done. It was in the school itself, and certainly at the upper grades, students can self-identify needs. So they'll go to the counselor, we'll work with the families, we need permission.
Okay.
And so students now...
You need permission to tell them about it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying at the high school, and then students now know it's there and will ask or request as it's become up and running.
Okay.
To date, I could give you, to date, they've seen close to 500 students.
This year?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. That's a good stat.
Piggyback on Councilwoman Francis, if she's not, I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't yet. So
No, I apologize, Kate.
That's okay. So I don't want to belabor it to have, I just would like you all to think about what I asked. And that is where in the priority of the funding that we are tearing apart and talking about what this and that, where does this land? Because truly, if it was a contracted disease, I don't know, think of Spanish flu or something, everybody would know. It's not. And I know you care about it, but just think about the people out there with their kids. They might feel better knowing that you've actually thought about it in terms of the money you're going to spend, because it's going to take money. So my other question is, and I think, Holly, this was to you, when you have a student come in who is not a legal resident, and they want to come to school here, and maybe they don't speak English so well, they bring in you have an interpreter in school or whatever. So what do you do if they don't have a driver's license or a passport or a Visa card? What do you do?
Well, it's tricky. We have to verify that they do have residency here in New Milford. We're working on that right now. Just because someone says, I'm living with somebody, we need to have verified proof that they do in fact. So we need that. We don't.
So do you ask them to go back to wherever, come back with the person you live with so they can speak to us and show us that you
there are
live here?
forms that we have that we then ask it to be notarized. We have a situation right now where a family tells us that they're living in a residency that they're renting from a family member. So we need to have a lease. And, you know, we're figuring it out.
But if
with
they
them.
don't have that, you know, I know people walk into that situation not really knowing what they had to have. So do you ask them to come back the
Oh,
next day?
absolutely. We have all that, we work with them to make sure they get all those pieces of paperwork.
So
Absolutely.
you're relatively sure that the families that are here, and as you said, you go through it and you consistently do that. And it's not to begrudge, obviously, we don't begrudge any child to have an education, but it is a spot that costs money.
19 grand.
And $19,000 per student. So if we take in, say, 10 kids who really don't live here, that's a lot of money, right?
And
So-
we have an obligation for students who become homeless as
Right.
well. So we do have some students that fall under that.
That is, you know, I know we have had that, and that's not what I meant. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And as long as you are confident that you're vetting properly, because, you know, to be fair, which is a good term to use for this, other towns send children to go to school here, and they pay. And, you know, I'm just saying that we don't begrudge the child, but I think there is important, because we do know that we've had families who are not living here, and that I appreciate they love our education, but, so anyway, that's all I have to say. But I just want to say thank you to Laura and to you too, Holly, and any of you that work with these kids as far as their issues that they have, whether they're related to, whatever they're related to. And I thank you for what you do.
Joe and then Tom. Joe?
So, I feel like that was a very heavy part of the night's conversation, no? So it's a little heavy. It's hard. Mental illness is very difficult to deal with.
It's pretty heavy if you got mental problems.
Trust me, I know.
Pretty heavy.
God, maybe you do.
Happening to them.
Right,
and their
that's
friends
right.
and their families, and they get in your car, and they cry. So
Yeah.
I'm one of those angry parents. This was the only issue I really came to speak about tonight. I've
Go
had
ahead.
children in my car for the last 2 months crying, going back and forth to the play practice because of bullying. That's been going on for years. And while they cry, what they're telling me is nobody is taking these kids out of the population. And it's the same kids, and every time they get turned in and the kid gets scolded, they get worse to the kid. Okay, we all know this. We all grew up in a time where bullying was settled in the schoolyard. Okay, it's happened to my own son, but he stands up to them. Okay, and they don't do that to him anymore. But these little kids and their parents that are running around trying to be good students and respect other adults and other children around them are getting stomped on. So much so, we're in the Connecticut newspaper. Okay? I know you guys are trying at this, but there has got to be a better process that a bully understands one thing. In the old days, you popped them in the nose and it was over. They usually ran away because bullies are also insecure people. And when they're confronted properly, they don't do it anymore.
So Tom, can you?
Nobody has that ability anymore. So all I want to say is, and I'm not advocating for any violence, so I apologize, but somebody has got to listen to these kids, okay, and find a way to protect them. And the ones that are doing it need to either get expelled or their parents brought in, because if a kid's a bully, it usually starts at home. We all know that, okay? But they either have to get expelled or find a nice quiet classroom in the administrative wing to spend a semester or two in there learning how to behave in public. I'm one of those angry parents, and there's a lot of them. And I'm not coming down on you, but we have to solve this as a community. As Chris said, and we all would agree, we would all join and listen and try to make strides to overcome this.
So Tom, I think
But our kids are going up
as
against
we can
this.
maybe wrap this into a budgetary question. So,
I hand the floor over, it's all you.
Because it is budgetary. I mean,
absolutely.
but bullying is very nuanced. It's not like it's very subtle. So in the same sentence, Chris was asking about class size. You know, if you have too many kids in a classroom, who is it who notices the bullying? The teachers are primarily overseeing and in the hallways. So if we're talking about outcomes based on what we give, how we finance our schools. A bullying climate is part of the equation. So I think that looking at the budget, we want to give the teachers enough give the schools enough teachers to create the environment that we're talking about. So it is dollars and cents. It's professional development for teachers. It costs money. These programs cost money. So we've been underfunding our schools. This is part of the outcome. So I don't think we can't separate it from the overall budget. I think bullying and school climate is part of what schools can build and their capacity to combat bullying in the schools. So I'm just, I'm totally in agreement with you.
I agree with you, but disagree with you in some. But bullies, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on a teacher, a bully is a bully. Okay? And unless somebody confronts that with some harsh penalties, we could throw as much money at this as we want.
Well, I think, just real quick, and then I'll give it to Joe real quick. I also think when you're talking about bullying, right now we seem to be hyper-focused on child to child. We also have to take in cognizance of teachers being bullied.
Oh, yeah.
Paraeducators being bullied. Lunch ladies being bullied.
It's
And
everyone.
teachers, right? They're the ones that educate our children. So I think we're talking about a safe climate. It should be a safe climate for everyone. And I know we've been working with the education, especially when we're talking about juvenile justice. That's a part of it. The youth agency, Jason and his team do wonderful work through that. So we're working at that. I know that Wendy, when you were board chair, you also was instrumental in with the town council as well of bringing in armed security officers as well as our SROs for any other events that could lead to other issues. So I think we need to be cognizant this is a holistic thing. It's not just kid on kid. It's much more than that. And, I think there will be, a cost and a benefit analysis that we all need to work on, both on the town and on the community level. Paul, I'm going to have Joe.
Yeah, just let me go first.
Okay.
Just for a second, so I want to back up a little bit what Tommy said. My daughter is a para at Schaghticoke. A week and a half ago, she was attacked by a kid she was taking down the hallway. So I'm a little upset as a parent. But it doesn't cost money to correct behavioral problems. It takes your staff to start doing what you were told to do by the books. You people made these books up. The state made books up for you. It says bullying in here. It gives you what needs to be done. How many kids have been expelled from school because of bullying? How many kids have dropped out of school? How many kids call up every day and don't want to go to school because they've been bullied for the last month and a half? How many kids now are in homeschool? These are questions that people are asking me every day. I've been swamped this past week with phone calls from parents, and I'm going to say 60 of them. A lot of them wanted to come here tonight, but I believe the PTO lady over in the corner might have told some of them not to show up. That's what I'm being told, which is fine. But I'm going to call the people back during town council meetings, and we're going to get down to brass tacks. And we'll call the Board of Ed in, we'll call the superintendent of schools in, and let's figure out what's going on, how to punish the kids, or at least bring in the police department, the Board of Ed, sit the kids down at Schaghticoke, because that obviously is the worst school we've got. The 7th grade is terrible. You got to take and get a handle on it. It's the kids that are running Schaghticoke. When the bell rings, kids are up and down the hallway. They're not even in their class. Some kids don't even go to a class. They just run the hallways all day long. You think I'm lying? Call your teachers in here, or I'll call the teachers in here. They'll tell you. The teachers up there are really getting upset. Some of the teachers are talking about retiring. They've had enough. When do you know? You all know. It's time to, the buck stops right here, right in this room with all of us. Let's get a handle on it and stop it.
Joe?
All right, I'd like to circle back around to some budgetary issues, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, Pete, can I address that since you called me?
I think we can wait.
You can address it.
I did not tell anyone not to come tonight.
Well,
I
I'm
told
being-
them not to come on Monday, and if they wanted to speak about Board of Ed and the bullying issues, it was better to come on Thursday, the night they were talking about the Board of Ed. So please don't say that I told people not to come.
Go back to
You
your
don't have the story.
go back to your parents and have them explain it then, because I'm getting phone calls from your parents saying
Let's-
that you told
let's
them
go
not to
back
be
to-
here tonight.
I'll get them to pull out my comment on Facebook. You
Let's
can
go
see it
back to-
ready. But how dare you say that I told people not to come, because I didn't. I suggested they come on Thursday, not Monday, because Thursday was the night we would be speaking about the Board
Joe?
of Education.
All right, let's
Thank you.
get back to budget. Joe?
Let's talk about some victories. But like, you guys look at educational outcomes on a year-to-year basis, right? I just want to hear something good. Where have you guys had a victory?
I think, I'll say one victory, I think our staff is stabilizing, so some of the churn that we've seen in our staff is diminishing. I think that's a really good thing. What we've gone through, COVID has been a nightmare. It's been a nightmare for every school district in the state, and it's particularly been gruesome here. But I think Dr. Parlato, I think, is here to stay. So, you know, we grilled her on that in the interview process. So,
Yes, he did.
so I think we have some stability now, and I think that's really helpful over the short term and the long term for this school district.
I mean, good leadership.
And good leadership, and also the leaders who have stayed with us.
Right.
Ms. Olson, Ms. Hollander, you know, we have good people in this district. As a matter of fact, throughout the district, you hear things like, I want to work in New Milford and I want to stay in New Milford. So
It's the greatest of all towns.
it's a small town, but it's a great town. So I think
Best town in
people
USA.
like to be here. So is there a lot of work to do? Yes, Joe.
Of course.
There's still a lot of work to do. But generally speaking, I think our trajectory is changing from a significant downturn during COVID to one that's starting to peak up a little bit.
So, in terms of leadership, right, and this
Could I have, that's a great question. Holly, could you talk, just for 2
just wanna
seconds?
share something really
Because it's
quick.
important.
First of all, you have
come on up. There's a microphone right there. Let's hear it. I want to hear all the good stuff, because we really, you know.
No, I want to tell you, you have amazing, I'm going to tell you a couple things. You have amazing teacher leadership, amazing. You know, I adore my job. I'm glad that I'm here, but I could not do the amazing work that's happening without the amazing teacher leadership. You really have amazing talent, and I've been in several districts. It's amazing. I keep using that word. The other thing I want to tell you is that we are being recognized by the State Department for our efforts in K-5 STEM. The mayor came and you visited, but one person is touching every single K-5 student on multiple small units of study. You have enrichment for all, not just some, all. You have an amazing STEM program, an amazing gifted and talented, but enrichment for all. And this afternoon, I left a meeting. Your high school is collaborating with our community to look for workforce development as we look at the pathways to support our students thinking about what they want to do when they leave us, so that they're life ready for whatever path they choose. So we're looking at pathways work, working in collaboration with the State Department and also industry partners. So those are just some of the great things. The other thing I want to say is the partnership within this community working with us. I mean, one of the great highlights for me is the partnership that we have with youth services. And it's I hope they feel it's reciprocal. But I know that I could call them on whatever I need, and I feel that that's probably back, that they feel the same way. So we have great partnerships as well. So I hope that helps.
No, it's great. Every year I say, you guys, like, I love Chief Cerruto from the police. I don't want to get too off the top, right? But I love his presentation because he always leads with the victories, you know? It's so much easier being on this side of the table to support a budget when you're like, wow, we've done this, we've done that, we've moved forward. You know, like, you want to support people who are on that side, right? So when you always hear all this doom and gloom and all the terrible things that are happening, sometimes you're like, man, there's like no way out, and we just can't throw enough dollars at the problem, or the dollars aren't helping the problem. So where is it? And you start looking to other ways, right? So as I'm going through and dissecting the budget, one of the things that I keep trying to do is find various metrics by which I can judge. And one of them is like, if you have a great story to tell, hey, you have great administrative staff in the teachers. That's a huge strength, you know? Maybe that's one area where, actually I have another question regarding this, right? The curriculum coaches that you guys picked up. I wanted to find out a little bit are they still in the budget? And how did they work out? Because I've kind of heard mixed things from some of the teachers that I discussed these things with, you know, in the school district, you know, again, like my students are in the school, so.
Well, we have state mandated to look at early literacy. If it were not for that curriculum coach, a waiver and taking a hard look at what we're doing in those early learning years for reading, we're onboarding a new curriculum in mathematics, have a new diagnostic tool, but that's not where it stops, because we're really looking at coherence and actually our pathways for enrichment in the middle school to ensure our students can have the opportunities to take those more rigorous classes at the high school. So a lot of great work has happened because of those teacher leaders that were funded again through the ESSER, but they are working tirelessly.
So are they still, so they're still in the district?
1 more year.
I'm sorry.
1 more year through the ESSER.
One more year through the ESSER funding, right? And then will those positions remain moving forward beyond that year?
Yeah, we'd have to put it.
Okay. And I assume the curriculum coaches that you pick up are licensed instructors in the field of study that they're curriculum coaches for. They have some sort of background and teaching experience along with that.
All of it, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, in terms of performance with the schools, where do we sit in the state? I mean, obviously you put up on slide 7. No, was it 7? Which one is the one where it shows that we're 156? Slide 6, right? That we sit at, what is it, 100, I can't see on there, 156 last year out of the, like, in terms of educational outcomes, where are we? Are we 156 in the state based on, no.
I would say to you that COVID did its fair share of providing us with opportunities. Our students did not bow well being at home, as we all know. The diagnostic tool that we now have has shown great growth from the fall to the winter, and we are looking forward to seeing where we end up in the spring with the third administration of that diagnostic tool. We've seen children through that focused instruction, because what that diagnostic tool does is it helps the teachers to know what their students need. We say teachers as doctors. So we're really trying to hone in on what students need, and through small group instruction, give students what they need, because part of this budget is supporting curriculum, the development of, and also the ability to, you know, use the greatest and latest items out there to help us move our achievement forward, and that is in place.
Right. So where do we stand? Like, are we like 70th? Are we 80th?
I don't
Are we
have that number, but in
135th?
some areas, you know, we absolutely can do better. And we did look at, I think it was the November Committee on Learning. There's an analysis of where we are. I mean, we do that every year. Once the Smarter Balance and other data points, we give sort of a state of the world of our district in terms of achievement, and we must do better.
Where do we stand?
I don't know the number. I know in some areas we are where the state is, but there are some grade levels that we are falling just a little bit below. I don't know. I don't have a number in ranking.
But Holly, we're better than 156.
Yes, we are.
Where were we last year?
That's apples and oranges. Yeah, that's per pupil. This isn't rank in terms of
Right. So
of
this is
student
just our per
performance.
pupil spending, but our educational ranking is not 156. If that's sort of your question.
Well, could you find out where we sit maybe for the previous year? I mean, obviously, I know the data for this year isn't there. I know, and I also know, because I have students in the district, that we regularly test to kind of figure out where the pupils are. That data, I'm sure, is aggregated somewhere. If you could find out and just kind of let us know. I mean, again, if it's a victory, it's a victory, you know? If not, maybe it might help help the decision making on the other side too, right? You know? Okay, so to talk about the per pupil spending, right? This is one of the hardest things for me to understand, not being an educator, right? I would think that I would go on and I would take the budget and I would divide it by the number of students and you get per pupil spending, right? But that's really kind of not the case, because the way that it is viewed is using the net current expenditures, right? That's the data that the state produces every year, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, 'cause I'm trying to figure this out, right?
No, that's correct. State has their own formula, and certain expenditures It's not budget, on a budget basis, it's on an expenditure basis, and it doesn't include all expenditures.
Right.
Right.
So there's some stuff that's not in there, right?
Correct.
And on a net expenditure basis, do you have any idea where we were for 22? Because that information has not yet been published, 22, 23. Well, I guess that would be this budget year.
That's this
Right.
current year we're operating in.
Okay, like any idea where like there's no projection for that? Because I'm just trying to kind of figure out like.
No, there's
All right.
not. There's
All right,
not.
because what it looks like to me is that like last year, you know, the budget was in 21, 22, the last reported year, 65 million was the school board budget, 61. It's kind of like if you take the surplus and back that out, it gets us most of the way there. There's like another $1 million or so in there, a few $100,000 that I can't seem to figure out how we get there. So I'm trying to kind of
You're trying to back out the surpluses from the net.
Yeah, and I can't figure it out. But it seems that like the budget has been increasing, and I mean at a pretty substantial rate. I mean just on the net expenditure basis from 19 to 20 to 21 to 2021, the budget went up 5.6%. I'm assuming on the net basis, I'm assuming that has to do with COVID, right? And then from 2021 to 21, 22, it went up another 3.9%. I'm assuming it's kind of, you know, this is rolling forward. It tends to track along with the budget. So where was I going with that? Where I was going is I'm trying to figure out. There's really no way for me to figure out. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out like how do you judge how much money you spend, right? If we're spending more money year after year after year, right? There's got to be some sort of metric that we can judge to figure out like is this effective, right? Like because
This does not tie to any educational outcome whatsoever.
It has no educational outcome whatsoever.
This is a number that
All
the
right.
state has a formula on.
So let me change gears on you, right? So then I go to, and I'm just kind of walking through my thought process over the last few days. I mean, it's a thick budget. I have no idea how many second grade teachers you need, I'll be honest. You know, like you guys have to make those tactical decisions, right? And the strategic decisions. We kind of only have, you know, say over the large bucket of funds based on what we believe the town, you know, can stomach in terms of an increase or, you know, whether we feel that what you're asking for is a need on the edges, right? So the next thing I go to is, you know, what is the proposed per pupil spending? You said it's like 19,000 and change per student, right? But that really doesn't get me anywhere. All right, how about we look at administrators per student? In this budget, how many students per administrator, what's the ratio of students to administrators in the current budget? Are we spending our money on direct educational expenses, or are we moving towards a top-heavy, right, where you have more administration, right, than maybe is necessary, because that might be an area. Or maybe we don't have enough, right, because you're saying that you have amazingly good administrators, the curriculum coaches have obviously had some impact on education, you know, I mean, we have to kind of look and see where we're trending. Do we have a number? She's looking.
I don't have a number there, but
What's the question?
the question was
The ratio.
administrative ratio to students, but it's again, that's a complicated question. The administrators don't necessarily have a relationship to student ratio. They have a relationship to teacher ratio because they have to do all the performance evaluations for all those teachers. They have to actually run their schools during the day. They have to handle, there's always handling of disciplinary issues as well, which typically go up to your assistant principals and things of that nature. So if your behavioral issues are going up, then you probably need more administrators for those behavioral issues to deal with those things, to the disciplinary hearings and the disciplinary sort of paperwork that needs to be done. I don't know what number you're after here, Joe, but.
So if you go to the budget book appendix
Right.
C9, the total number of administrators, when I mean administrators, I mean employees in the administrator's bargaining unit. So this would not like include myself for reference, because I'm not in that bargaining unit. The administrators in the bargaining unit, there are 17.6.
Okay.
17.15 are funded by the book in front of you. 0.45 is funded by a grant. And if you take a look at that, those 17.6 are envisioned in this budget to continue in 23-24.
Right.
At the same time, the projected enrollment is 3,675. So that's one administrator to roughly 208 students.
Okay,
I don't
excellent.
have a reference for other districts,
So-
but that's just the simple math by taking the
Yeah, no,
numbers of the book.
But do you
I'm trying
remember,
to-
but on to that point, Joe, I can't remember what year, it could have been 3 years ago, so I apologize. The board at a budget presentation did a drill down on administrative staff in relation to our DERG and in-state averages. And from what I can recall, we were under the state average, and we were well within,
Yeah,
where we're
I'm-
supposed to be, but that's the actual student to administrator ratio.
Right, okay, so now, to your point, what is the non-teaching staff, non-administrative to student ratio?
Everything is on page C9 in the
Right.
appendix, so you'd have to bucket them together. That's a nuanced question. I mean, so do you mean non-instructional, that includes
Non-instructional.
paras?
Yeah.
That includes
Custodians.
Custodians, finance
So you want each
department?
bargaining unit broken down per.
No, I mean, like, just as a group, non-administrative, right? So this is someone who is not directly involved in education, right? Right, they're involved in
So do you cut the paras out of that, Joe?
Well, the paras would be an educator, right?
Well, the paras are
They're-
assistants to educators, but they're not educators. I mean, they're assistants to education.
They're not certified staff either. Whichever kind of metric you want to build, you
It's
can
on
do that.
C9.
Okay, all right, I'll look at C9.
It's by bargaining unit and
Right.
it includes non-bargaining teachers
You
versus.
could take that number, there's a total number of those classified positions that you're asking about. And if you're looking to take that number and compare it to the number of students based on enrollment, that will give you your,
Right, yeah, 'cause I'm trying to
Yep, it's
figure
right
out
there.
what's the trend, right? You know, are we maintaining some sort of a trend? Are we staying consistent where, hey, we know that we're trying to keep a certain ratio of these things? Or as students are declining, which they were up until the last 2 years, actually, with the 3655 number, we're actually starting to kind of, our district is leveling out, maybe even going up a little bit in terms of the number of pupils, right? Which is good. I mean, the more pupils, more efficiency. Anyway, all right, so back to the teaching side. We had mentioned the wonderful gifted and talented program. How many gifted and talented teachers do we have in the district?
one.
One. Just one. And how many, that's K through 8, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And,
Isn't that crazy? I mean, like, I couldn't believe it.
Crazy, is not
and the thing that is, he sees the identified students, but he has touched every student at Sarah Noble through their various, this enrichment for all, chess is going on,
Yeah.
mind benders, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's, that might be an area to look, you know, like, because I kind of feel like, you know, that might be an underserved population within the district.
We actually fought this town and I mean all of us through budget process to hold on to the tag program a few years ago.
Right, which
It was a concern about, you know, whether we're gonna keep it or not. Other districts don't have that, and that doesn't, I don't want this to sound harsh. I'm concerned about New Milford district, what's in the better interest of New Milford, so we're proud that we have it. Your comment of enriching something in those services is well-founded.
Right. And I guess that's, I mean, most of the other stuff that I had on here, I think was covered. I do have one other comment going through all of my little research that I've been able to do on this one sheet of paper, like halfway in between work while I'm not answering the phone. I did find that someone had done an equity index for spending by school districts, which I thought was kind of interesting because it's like, what is equity, right? And it touches on the slide, because you actually mentioned it, the adjusted equalized net grand list per capita, I think that was the one, where you're looking at other similarly capable districts, right? You said that when they're looking at your capacity to spend on education, right? We actually land, if you adjust for income by the district with the new census that just came, I've actually found a couple of different answers on this, but our median income sits somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 a year. So I've seen 78 all the way up to 93, depending on which organization you're looking at, what they look at the median income. And out of the 166 districts, this one particular one that I found, I forget what the website was. if I find that, I'll let someone know. We sat 84th out of the 166th. So we're actually pretty much on target for per pupil spending when you adjust for average income, right? I thought it was interesting that Darien was the least equitable, and their median income, according to this particular organization, was $243,000 a year, where ours was, in this particular slice of the pie, they had us at $93,000 per year median income. So even though they were spending $24,000 per student a year, $5,000 more than us, their capacity was much higher for that level of spending, and they weren't making that contribution. As a town, we actually hit right in the middle of the pack, kind of right on target at our $19,000 a year. I just thought it was an interesting data point.
Hillary?
It passed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sal?
Yes, the linear progression between how much we spend and how good the students academically do, I strongly disagree with this, because it takes more than money to educate the people, to be honest with you. Now, ma'am, we're unfortunate we didn't have a chance to meet at the town council, so you were not presented to us. I have full faith in you that you're going to lead this organization, which is to be a CEO of our education system here in New Milford. But as I said, the problem that we have in New Milford right now is that our academia is not the best, and that I didn't get the numbers before. We didn't get the numbers before that Joe asked, because they're not good. We're not in the top 10. We're not in the top 20. We're not in the top 30 or 40.
Right.
With 50 and past. Now, if the linear progression with between money and academia was so it, probably what would have to do, what would be the number? We don't know, right? You basically don't know these things, right? Now, one of the differences so you're going to be CEO, or you are the CEO of the academia. Mayor Bass is the CEO of this town. Your salary is $230,000. His salary is $103,000. Now, academia-wise, we're way over 50. We're not even in the top 40. From the town side, we're AA financially. So this is what I'm talking. Money is not everything. It's a lot. It's probably 80, 85. But the 15% is the top that either gets you there or it doesn't get you there. For success or failure, pretty much. Now, since we didn't have a chance to talk to you, unfortunately, I just want to speak to you. I would like to know your philosophy. How can we get to the top 20 next year? And I'm all for the budget. Or 30 or 40. If this is fun, this whole budget is a joke, right? Because we're here for the kids. Because I hear a teacher, this, boiler that. Who cares about a boiler? I mean, it's an important thing. But this whole budget is about the kids. If we have one kid in the school, the 71 million, what the hell we're voting for one kid, right? So it's all about kids. So I'd like to know if you can tell us a little bit about your philosophy. I'm just talking to you. I don't want to hear anybody else. What is your philosophy to get us from point A, which is not so good, to point B? And I don't want you to be, as successful as Mayor Bass next year. I would like to, but it's not possible. Can you give us a little, what's your philosophy to get us to, I don't know, to 30, 40, whatever that would be? Basically better than what we are now.
So Ms. Hollander mentioned that we're starting a new math program. And so we want to make sure that the curriculum that we have in place meets the needs of our kids and teaches them what they need to know. So one of the reasons that we're switching over to that new math program is so that they learn the math that they need.
Math is a great idea. Science and math is the winner in the whole world right now, right? With the
Agreed.
AI comment, ML, and everything in between. I got it. What next?
One of the things that we're looking at as a district, but also as a state, is how do we increase students' reading comprehension? How do we make sure that they decode, that they understand the text that they read, that their reading is as solid as it can be, which in turn will help their writing.
So you're 7 days in the job. You're saying that
Yes.
hasn't been implemented before? That's why
I'm saying that it has been implemented before. How can we do it better? By improving our curriculum.
So percentage-wise, what do you think, by looking at this, your experience, a teacher and everything, right?
Yes.
So you know your stuff. By looking at what's happening right now, what do you think we can improve, let's say next year? As you see, for I don't know, 7 days or something. It's not. It's a small district. It's 3,000, over
For sure.
3,000. We're not talking about Queens, New York, or Brooklyn, or anything like this.
Understood.
Where the mayhem is all over the places. This is manageable stuff, pretty much, right?
Correct.
So, okay, so reading, great. What else? What else can we do to improve the whole academia thing and bring them to the, I don't know, as I said, 40, 50 place in the state? What else can we do?
I wanted to say, you could have stopped at reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Exactly. Joe, those
Because
are the ones
I
that
really
do.
think that, like, in all honesty, like, if you focused on that, reading, writing, and arithmetic, 'cause that's where I see the failures with most kids. I mean, having kids.
But we haven't heard anything yet. I mean, the full thing. So let's the superintendent speak.
Yeah.
This is feeling very, talk about bullying. I'm feeling just very like
Yeah.
sweating and feeling nervous from, I
What
mean,
is so
let us-
bullying about? What is so
let's
bullying
just,
about?
Take a breath.
What is so, speaking, first of all, I have the floor. I asked the superintendent the question. That's all. Not Joe, not Hillary, superintendent. Let's hear.
This is
I just
not-
wanted to
this
say
is
you
not-
hit
this is-
the target for me.
Excuse me.
Let's go.
Hang on, everybody. Hang on. So to the superintendent, do you feel threatened at all in any way by his questioning?
I'm happy to answer his question.
Exactly. Wonderful. This is what we want to
So-
hear. Okay, so we
Yeah.
have reading, math, fantastic. What else can we do?
So I can also connect it to our budget priorities. So we know that when students are better engaged in school, so that's not only through the academics traditionally, but also in things like intramurals and things like clubs and things like athletics. So you can see we have an intramural stipend for Sarah Noble. That's going to engage the students, not only academically, but make them feel like they belong even more to the school. That's an example of how they succeed.
Agreed. Do you agree, for instance, that the behavior, bullying, and everything else that goes on in the schools is a part of the problem that academia is not doing so well? Because you have like a, I don't know, snowball effect. One says, I don't care about the school. The other one
Correct.
cannot say, I care about the school because the bully is going to get to him. So you care about the school all of a sudden, Paul? Something like this, right? So that
yeah.
stuff is going on. If you're a bad guy, you cannot be a good guy all of a sudden with a bad guy.
Yeah, we know
That's
that.
part
yes,
of the underlying thing that was going on.
for
right?
sure. We know when
Yeah.
students are better engaged.
Okay. What
And
does that
that
mean?
they-
Engage. What does that
Engaged
mean?
means that a bunch of different things. It means that they like going to school. It means that they find the work relevant and
Agreed.
interesting.
Agreed.
It means that they understand and they realize their own progress.
Agreed. Okay, so that's engagement / behavior-ish. So we'll do math, reading, behavior / this. Like, what else can we do?
Well, I think,
Mayor, can I interrupt just for a
Excuse me,
second? I
excuse-
think
excuse, sir.
we're off track a little
Talk
bit.
to the
I-
superintendent.
Please,
Mr. Chair, just for one second. So Sal, maybe you could take this offline with the
Okay.
superintendent, where I'm sure she'd be much happy to engage in a little more, and we could continue on budgetarily with
I
any
guess
additional
my
questions.
questions were spot on budget.
Absolutely.
Because the budget is about the kids. Not about anything else, it's about the kids.
That's right.
Period.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sal.
I would like
Hillary?
to speak. I think that everybody should be sure, here in this room and in the public, to watch the video of the budget presentation, the budget that you guys presented over the course of, how many days was it? 4 days. Because all of the heads of school, each of the schools came and spoke about their philosophy of their school, and it was a very uplifting, positive, powerful presentation about how our schools are fantastic and what we can do to make them even better. But this budget that was voted in unanimously, passed unanimously, and it is an inflationary increase. It is nothing more. This is 2 teachers, an addition of 2 teachers to keep the student ratio 24-1. It is, this is a very responsible budget. So I just feel like we should all do our homework and watch all of those videos because it does have a lot of information. And I'm just speaking in support of that. Thank you.
Again, it's all about kids. Numbers and numbers.
Tom?
This is Chris. Can I?
Oh,
Go ahead, Chris.
Chris?
Yeah, just a couple additional things. On the residency issue, I think this question is for Holly. One of the measures of a process is, defects, what is it called? So over the last 2 or 3 years, how many new students have we found were not really eligible for residency?
Well, I'm just really here, this is my second year, and so last year, I did not have many. This year, we are looking into several instances, and even, have had to issue disenrollment forms. It's hard, it's about children, right? And I love that they love our schools, but, we have to be responsible to our community. So we have. So there's probably 5 that we are looking into right now, and there are ones that we had to issue disenrollment forms.
Can we send a bill just to the tax assessor's office and tell them to register?
I'm sorry?
You'd have to establish residence somewhere else so they send that bill though, right?
Right.
5 last night, I heard 5 currently.
Yes, last year we people who we thought might not have were able to verify their residence. This year we're having to be more tenacious and then take next steps to address the situation.
Okay, so, but basically, you haven't really denied anyone yet?
Yes, I have. I have.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you have? Okay. How many?
Currently 1.
Okay, all right. And I would just want to challenge the notion that I heard earlier here that more behavioral problems means we need more administrators. And I would challenge that because, one of the things I heard from the parents, so I think our process on the anti-bullying really needs help. Because one of the parents' biggest complaint was it's the victim who then has to make changes rather than the bully. So if that's how we're doing it, we can have all the administrators we want, and I don't think that's going to change the behavior of the bullies at all.
I agree. Can I clarify?
So
No
I
one
would challenge
said we
that
needed.
we automatically need more administrators because the more behavioral problems.
I don't believe that anyone indicated we needed more administrators, and our budget that was sent forward by the Board of Education does not add any administrative staff.
No, it was mentioned.
Well, that was,
when
I'm just
Chairman
replying
Hollis
to a
said
comment
something.
just made earlier. Okay, yeah, and I would also say, when we prioritize our spending, we've talked about that. And Joe asked a really good question on, hey, what are our victories? Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me a lot of the victories were adult-based, not children-based, right? It's, stabilization of staff, which is important, et cetera. But it's, again, are we really prioritizing more budgetary dollars on really what gets through to the students? And that's just a general comment, I realize. Thank you.
Chris, Joe, Tom?
So first up, I just want to state that I hope I did not seem aggressive to you just in a bullying way. I'm the parent of a son and a parent of kids in this town. Watching them cry breaks your heart. It just does. I want to talk about, just to have a highlight of what Laura had put on about a week ago. During the budget, I was home listening to the budget, and I was listening into the parents' meeting. It was spectacular. A lot of folks that have kids with some executive function issues, it really enlightened us. But what I want you to just talk about for 1 second is what, I forgot his name, the doctor that was on, explaining the immaturity of kids coming out of COVID and the example that we have juniors that are acting like freshmen.
Absolutely.
And if you could just kind of highlight that a little bit, because I think it's part of what we're talking about overall. I'm not criticizing your budget. I'm supporting this. Okay, I've been here 14 years. Wendy would probably be shocked to say that I wouldn't criticize a number in your book. I'm fine with that. It's we are here to give the best to these kids, but I think for some context, people need to realize where our kids are coming out of COVID, and that I think it's rolling into poor outcomes in school. I find my son, unless we're on him, he's an A student. He's an A student this week. Next week, he could blow a test like this and not think that there's an issue with it. And he's a junior.
I'm not trained, and I'd like to give Laura an opportunity to speak to. I think that's very important as this is budget. I think it's fair to say, just my opinion, that children coming out of COVID, coming back into a social environment in which they're kept away from for so long, still learning the basic skills of how to say hello to,
Right.
you know, a friend.
I know.
In person, having the personal skills to behave. Now, that's not the excuse.
No.
There's many, many problems, many.
Social media is a problem.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest problem.
Absolutely.
It hands down is.
That's the closed
you
door
know,
right there.
that, when you just said that, a few years ago, the police department put on a outstanding, and the PTO had sponsored a social media awareness and put it out to parents. Please come out and see what is going on app-wise. The police did one, PTO sponsored
Besides,
one.
the COVID is a part of it, but not
Do you
the biggest
know,
one.
sadly, maybe 30 people came.
So we can have an agreement. We can't blame everything on COVID because that's not the
Exactly.
case.
No, that wasn't where I was going, but I'm
That's fine.
saying this culture right now is a manifestation of many things and not just COVID. That would be, in my opinion, wrong to put it in that bucket. Social media is not our friend to our youngers right now. That is my opinion.
That's why we need the leadership, and that's why we spoke to the superintendent, because she's the CEO of that business. So, and she looks like a very smart person, so I have a full confidence in her.
Well, that's what, listen,
Any,
so social media contributes to
Budgetary
that.
question.
Okay.
All right, but this is a
everything's
budgetary, give me a second, because the two ladies who asked the question have never got a chance to answer it.
Yeah.
Okay? I appreciate all the nuance on all the budget, okay? But it is what it is in front of us. It's what we're facing right now that was a combination of social media isolating our kids, as Dr. Peralta just said. They can't even say hello. And Wendy and I know that, I mean, we all know this. You know, I've been at this for 14 years just in this seat. I watch kids come through this district. Years ago, they learned how to reach out and say hello. They do this.
Yep.
Hi, how are you? They look down at their phone and they walk away. Then we put them in isolation for 2 years. So the mental health, the maturity levels, and obviously the academic desire to achieve kind of disappeared with them. They kind of felt like, I got a world in here. I'm talking to friends around the country. I walk in, my son is talking to a kid from Vietnam. He's talking to a kid from Texas. They all enjoy these games, right? But try to get him out of the house. Now, luckily, he is the product of a social person. But even for him, he has, he's quieter than he was. And I find that a lot of the kids are. So if you could just touch on what they said that night a little more, I think that would,
Not Dr. Chris Applegard, but I'll try.
He was terrific, by the
Before
way.
Laura answers, I just want to say something, because this is a positive, all right? If you ask me, when I got involved with the Board of Education, I don't know any of these people, but I will say without a doubt that I have high confidence in the competence and the compassion of these people
So
here.
do I. So
Right?
do I, 100%.
So if you want anyone to lead you through this, it's these people here.
It's them.
So
Agreed.
now I'll let Laura answer.
Agreed. I love the program she
Strong
puts out
intro.
because it does spotlight that what parents are trying to figure out at home. So
I
thank you,
think
Laura.
that there's many layers to this whole thing. One of them obviously was 3 years of being isolated, almost 3 years. And you look at our kindergartners who started with the pandemic, they never had a full kindergarten experience. They never got the social exposure. They never got any of the academics. You go into first grade, it's remote. A first grader cannot sit behind a Chromebook and engage and interact and learn, nor can a second grader. So here they are as third graders. So there's a big gap in what they've been able to accomplish socially, emotionally, and then academically. So there's a big disparity right now, and when Chris Applegard came in and he talked, he really focused on almost like these kids have been stalled, and so a 10th grader sitting at home behind their Chromebook could turn on their class, mute their face, go and do something else, and we know that happened, even if our teachers tried to engage and re-engage them. But then there's also the social piece of it. The bullying behind the screen, the things that you can't see, you can't detect. Even that situation, and I don't want to get into it, but with it, being dropped on a bus, and so everyone had that information. Those are very dangerous, painful things for our families and for our students. And so there are many layers to this, and so we need to reteach our kids. We need to teach and reteach them social norms. I talked to a fourth grade teacher a couple days ago, and she said they didn't even have the skills at the beginning of the year to raise their hand to ask to use the bathroom or to go and to use a pencil. Those are executive functioning skills that a lot of our children came back lacking. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I very much believe that you have to open their hearts before you can open their minds. And I've always felt that, and that's why I've always been an advocate for what I do. So I feel your pain. I know that it's not easy being a parent.
You guys feel the same pain.
Of course,
That's
we
the thing.
do.
We
There are
all
children
feel
too,
it.
but
And
a
I
little
know
different.
you were doing a great job at this, and this is a huge mountain to hurdle, to jump. It's not about how much money you have in that bucket, all right? It is the philosophy of the community on how we're going to re-engage our kids, share the love with them so they can stop being so angry, and re-engage in school. You have my 1,000% confidence that you're going to do an amazing job helping to bring this back. So I am going to support you 100% here. You will not get any argument out of me this year.
Joe?
Thank you.
I got one last question. Pete, you said something really interesting at the very beginning of your presentation. You said, for the most part, this is a must-to-have budget. What is the not most part?
Look, could we use more teachers just because of these gaps? The answer is yes, right? Is this a reasonable request, the 2 second graders and the 4th grader? Of course, that's a reasonable request. Could you have added another 4th grade teacher? They didn't ask for it, the superintendent didn't ask for it, so I can't tell you that would be beneficial. I think it probably might have been or would be, but here we are today, right? So, and if you took a motion and you know the numbers, if you wanted to add another teacher to the district for use in the 4th grade, I wouldn't look sideways at that.
Of course not.
Right? So, I mean, I don't know.
You just add any teacher, a specific
No, because you heard Laura
Jumping
talk
teacher,
about,
yeah.
talk about executive function loss for 2nd graders or 4th graders. So there's a significant need there, right? And so that's why the superintendent proposed and the Board of Ed accepted these are real needs. We feel this, right? We all feel this deeply and personally. And we trust the people who are the professionals behind us who are making this recommendation. You know what? If they knew that they had open budget to do whatever you want, they would have requested more. I guarantee you that. But that's not what's before us. What's before us is what we think is a reasonable plan. And we come back next year for the next reasonable plan. And we come back the year after that with the next reasonable plan. That's the only way we move forward. I don't know how to go backwards and forwards with how taxpayers react to a budget increase, right? It's a struggle. Some years it's like, the economy sucks. I didn't get a raise this year. Why should anyone else get a raise? I know those feelings are strong, and that really impacts our students in ways that it's hard to fathom, really. So yeah, it's a must-have budget. I think I would like more, of course, and I'm a fiscal conservative, so that's hard for me to say. But I think our students deserve more at this point.
Joe Triana?
I just have a quick question. I'll make it quick. You're talking about an extra teacher here, extra teacher there. You're talking about kids with challenges, executive functions, things like that. Is throwing more teachers at it the problem, or possibly training the current teachers? Do they have the proper skills to get these kids up to speed, or just throwing on trained people at it is not going to help too much, I would think.
I'm going to take a stab at this, and I'll let other people who are actually more intelligent about this. If you have a kid who needs help, and let's say you have 10 kids who need help, would an individual attention to the one child be more helpful than a group of 10 kids trying to help them all with their various needs? Like one-on-one care is better than one-on-20 care.
Not if they're not equipped with those skills.
But we're not hiring teachers who aren't equipped with the skills.
Fair enough.
Can I
I would say to you,
Holly?
it is the fiber of my being that every teacher has the right to be a learner. And I would say to you wholeheartedly that we have used every second available to us to appropriately support our teachers in being learners. That really is the truth. And the way that the professional learning calendar exists in this district is small. We're responsive to working families. We have teachers who are using their professional learning community times, their 1 hours after school staff meetings. There are no longer those staff meetings where we kind of go through a list. All of those meetings are professional learning and meaningful to the goals that the building leader has set forth.
Any other questions? Mary Jane?
I just want to say thank you for presenting such a great budget. I would like to see you get more teachers. I feel that way every time this budget comes before us. But I think this has been a very good, responsible budget. And as far as the bullying goes, you know, it's not just the kids. There are so many adults in this country that don't know how to behave and don't know how to talk civilly to their neighbors, to anybody. So the kids are getting, a lot of the kids in this country are getting bad role modeling, basically. And it's from the top down. It's not just the kids. I don't know what we're going to do with all these adults that don't know how to interact politely and you know, to their friends, to their neighbors, to the rest of the country. So it's a big societal problem at this point.
Doug?
So I want to thank the superintendent. I didn't know you only been on the job for 7 days, so welcome to the fire. They threw you right into the fire. Obviously, and just to piggyback on what COVID has an effect on children, it's also had an effect on adults.
Oh, yeah.
Like Mary Jane just said.
Absolutely.
Being isolated and stuff like that. And I know that you guys work hard every year. This is probably one of my least favorite days of this BOE, going from you guys got to ask for money, it goes back and forth. And it's not easy to sit here and ask the public for, you know, $70+ million. And so I appreciate your efforts. You know, we all have children in this town. We all love this town. So I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. Katie?
I just want to thank you also, and it is a lot, as Doug said, it's a lot harder to talk about and try to determine how we're going to allocate money for a child or children than maybe a dump truck. Although we need the dump truck, and we need the teaching, and we need... I just want to give you a nice comment. I was fortunate enough to do reading today at Northville with Mrs. Williams, and if I ever met a teacher who had it on the ball, she started teaching later, and you guys know her, of course. I could not believe, this is second grade class, talking about rectangles, rectangular prisms, vertices, and they were drawing three-dimensional pictures. And I read a book, and then, you know, I asked them what they got out of it, and then they proceeded to tell me in detail what it meant to have integrity, what it meant to, and I was like, where are these children dropped from? You know, but she is really, really the epitome at for a second grade class that's stellar and controlled. I thought, and we actually talked about the fact that there's a lot of bad things in the news about people not getting along and children having issues, that to me it made my whole year to see this class of kids who are having fun. And the kids liked it so much that I'm going to go back and read next month. And she also said it's been a long time since we've seen a lot of happy things in the newspapers about our students in this town. It used to be all the time. Every week there'd be a picture of a class.
Right.
And so I told her that I would personally make an effort to make that happen. So I'll be talking to some of you about how to do that. So I appreciate that you're here. It's not easy for any of us, and it's really not easy for the taxpayers that aren't here. We have to think about them, and we're all there. You know, it's not us. Yeah.
Great to see how those young people love reading. It was awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Did you get one? I after one book, you know, they were all clapping. It was so exciting, and it was just, you left there.
Well, we had picture sessions. The book was Those Shoes. I'm sure some of you know that book.
Walter?
And it was very clenching, you know, that's so sad. Nice.
Yes, I want to go back to the budget here for a little bit.
Oh, really?
I echo what everybody else has said, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. In your presentation, can we go to page 3? Yeah.
Of your slide? What slide did you put up there?
Oh, let me go back here.
Yes, the pie chart.
That one, Walter?
Okay, yeah, that's it. And I'm looking at salary and benefits come up to around 70% plus of your budget, if my math off the top of my head is correct, about 77%, round figures. Of the salary line, how much of those are all contractual? Your employees in the school district, the majority of them are contractual, it's not all of them?
You told us that earlier. The contractual went up, and I guess.
He's asking which is contractual, which is not employee-based.
Those salaries are not parsed out like that. The salaries or the headcount by bargaining unit is on Appendix
Okay, what I'm
C9.
saying, my point is that the vast majority of the employed are union and
Yes.
contracted,
Yes.
and others
Yes.
are not.
Yes.
So you don't have a lot of discretion in those budgetary items
Well,
there.
for true transparency, Walter, you sat in on the board on several of
Oh, I
those
know.
contracts.
That is true.
We have 7 bargaining units.
I am doing this for the edification that we have new members here on the council, on both the town council and the Board of Finance, and we have unknown number of people in the public that may not be as familiar
Yeah.
as those that have been here for decades doing this.
So there's 7 bargaining units.
And the only, okay, thank you. And the only way to reduce that is, or to control that budgetary item is to reduce staff. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yes.
We're also, I mean, just to make a point, we're also trying to improve things that are minimum wage. Some of our positions are minimum wage, and the minimum wage has risen in the state of Connecticut, and we have to adjust for that in these contract negotiations. And I will say this, I would like to have done more during those contract negotiations for some of our bargaining units, because it's a shame to say that you could work at McDonald's for the same amount of pay as an entry-level para. Like, that's crap to me, but, you
If
know.
not more at McDonald's. And you know as well as I do, we were together on some of those bargaining
Yep.
units.
And
Yes,
thank
we
you
are.
for your time
Yeah.
on that.
I just want, people at home and the inexperienced people here to realize that 70+% of their budget is not a lot they could do with, other than reduce staff, which, talking everything we've talked about tonight, the one you're right, they really can't do, or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Everything
That's all,
approved.
Pete.
Thank you, Walter. Any other questions? Okay. Paul?
I'll just make one more comment. One is, I was at the Board of Ed the night the budget went
You were.
through.
Thank you for coming.
And I turned to some of the cohorts on the other side that night, and I said, I think we got a good budget.
Now, I heard that as a rumor, and I said, I actually heard that as a rumor because New Milford still has that little rumor mill, and I said, seriously?
My complaint is only the bullying. And what I'm concerned about is that the 7th and 8th graders are getting ready to go into the high school. And that 7th and 8th grade, from kindergarten on, has been a problem. So, so I'm hoping.
It's Bob. Can you speak up? I can't make out what you're saying.
I'm sorry. So what I'm hoping is, and I've heard rumors already that the superintendent has been over to Scotticoke, and some things have changed in the last 2 days.
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have.
So, not only do I hear that from, obviously, relatives, but a lot of the teachers over there are friends of mine. So, teachers are concerned too. I mean, it's just not parents. It's teachers that don't want to say anything. Maybe they're afraid to say something because their job is at stake, who knows? But it's got to stop. And we need to get a handle on it as quick as we possibly can, and I think you're the lady that's going to do it, by the way. It's been a tough road for you. I don't think you realized when you stepped foot here that you were facing this, but you're in it now.
We were very honest with her.
Yeah, you're in it now, right up to your neck. And I'm prepared to back you up 100%, and I know my colleagues here on both sides of this table are. We need to do everything we can for the kids. The Republican Party, for some reason, this town always gets a bad rap that we don't look out for our kids. That's not true. I've got grandkids, I got nieces, I got nephews that are still going through the school system. So I'm here for you. But you got to remember that our public is hurting right now. The economy's bad. You go to the grocery store, what you used to buy it for $100. Yeah, you don't get it now. You get a couple bags if you're lucky.
You got electric bill?
Yeah. Gas, electric.
And that's something that you have to consider, because to be honest with you, the $2 million increase in the budget, right? What does that equate to on transfer to the taxpayer?
That's
If
right.
you use it as a proportion against the $80 million, that's usually the taxpayer's contribution, right? I don't know what the exact number is, about $80 million, but you're probably looking at, for a median house in New Milford, just from the Board of Ed increases, about $100 per year on a $4,000 tax bill. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a significant increase.
Some people it is.
It is. It is.
$10 sounds like a lot.
We had
I know, that's-
we had social services before us here this week. We had the senior center. You'd be surprised the number of meals that they have to send out.
Right.
How the hardships is, how people are asking for fuel money, grocery money. It's terrible. And I just hope that we can settle our kids down. They're our biggest asset in this town. You can talk about the buildings, we can talk about
I
everything.
agree.
Children are our assets.
100%.
That's why I backed the Children's Center.
I would
and
say
the
they're the most
nonprofits
vulnerable
that work
assets
with
as
it.
well.
The most vulnerable asset is a great way to carry.
Any other questions to the
I agree.
I thank you very much for coming.
to the board? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Motion?
Yes.
Very well.
You have my name and address, so I'm assuming from the beginning. I sat here and I listened to very honest talk about bullying. My children are 8th graders at Schaghticoke. My son, last year, towards the end of the year, was in my car crying, not because he was being bullied, but because he was in a school where bullying was rampant and he felt like he had nothing he could do about it. So through that, he spoke to his friends, he spoke to the administration there. He was invited to the school climate committee, as were parents. And I can honestly tell you that my 2 children and I have been to all but one school climate committee since last year. It's not doing enough. It's not. Your questioning tonight, some of it though, showed your ignorance, I have to say. If you had gone to or listened to or watched any of the presentations that these fine folks put together, 4 nights of them, which I did. I attended all of them. Some of you were there for part of them, and I thank you. Some of you were there for all of them, and I thank you. But if you were not able to attend in person, the least you could have done is listen to them, because you would have had the answers to your questions. And I feel that the questions about the budget, you just had to listen to the presentations and you wouldn't have had those questions. If you wanted to talk about the superintendent's salary and compared to the mayor's salary, superintendents by law in Connecticut have to have a doctorate. There you go. There's the difference in salaries. I'm not trying to say I just wanted to point out there's a huge salary difference. There is a huge salary difference, but it is because there are requirements. It's public comment. I'm glad that so many people are aware of the bullying situation now. I'm glad that Dr. Parlato is out of the gate making a difference. That's wonderful. But to some of your points tonight, where are those line items? We don't have a specific anti-bullying program. It gets worked into our morning exercises at Schaghticoke, which happen a couple days a week, where they do social emotional learning lessons a few days a week. There is now a student leadership club that has grown out of the school climate club that started just a few weeks ago. But I will say this to you. When was the last time any of you went into our schools? You've been invited every year since I've been coming to these things. Not just to read to the classes, like go in, sit with the administrators, talk to them. Really, really dig down into what's going on and what they need. Because I think you'll find there's a lot of stuff that they need, it's not in these budgets. This is the bare minimum that they can get by with to hold it together. So I encourage you, if you feel like bullying is that much of a problem, go ahead and give them a little bit more resources so they can bring in an actual program that's been shown to work in other areas of the country. Do it. Find a program, let them find a program they'd love to be able to bring in and tell you how much it costs and increase the budget. That's my challenge to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public? Sal?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
What? You gotta have the, first gotta have Walter.
Walter do it.
And Walter, you're actually done, so this is to adjourn, except for the council where we'll recess.
Okay, motion to the Board of Finance to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
To the, thank you, and to the town council.
That's good.
Motion to recess to Thursday, March 9th, 7 PM.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Yes, that's a good point.
The budget on the website so that people